The city lay in ruins, a skeletal landscape of shattered glass and crumbling concrete. Morning light filtered through the haze of decay, casting long shadows across streets littered with rusted cars and the occasional, less identifiable debris. In what had once been a grand plaza, now a graveyard of toppled statues and fractured fountains, a figure stirred. Leo opened his eyes. The process was not like waking from sleep. It was more akin to a system booting, a consciousness snapping into focus from a state of dull, perpetual awareness. He was lying on his back atop a cracked marble dais, the cold stone pressing against his tattered clothing. He sat up slowly, joints moving with a stiffness that felt both ancient and unnatural. His hands, pale and marbled with faint blue veins, flexed before his face. He remembered having hands. He remembered many things, the taste of sun-ripened peaches, the sizzle of steak on a grill, the crisp chill of a morning breeze that carried no scent of rot. The memories were sharp, crystalline, and utterly, mockingly useless. A low, guttural groan escaped his lips, a sound born of pure, unadulterated frustration. It was not the mindless moan of the others. It carried weight, intention. The psychic ripple that accompanied it was instantaneous. All around the plaza, in the doorways of gutted shops and behind the husks of vehicles, figures froze. Dozens of them. Their clothes hung in rags, skin gray and mottled. Their eyes, milky and vacant, were all turned toward the dais. They stood perfectly still, like grotesque statues awaiting a command. Leo's innate kingly control. He could feel them, a dull, buzzing presence at the edge of his mind, a hive of simple, hungry impulses. He could command them to march, to attack, to stand still. He could not command them to understand his boredom. His own hunger was a constant, gnawing void. But it wasn't for the bland, stringy flesh the horde craved. The thought of it turned his stomach, or what passed for his stomach now. He craved complexity. The burst of juice from a peach, the savory fat of a perfectly cooked steak, the bitter tang of dark coffee. Real food. The memory taste was a torment. He rose to his feet, his movements deliberate, testing. He walked to the edge of the dais and looked out over his silent, obedient kingdom. Ruin. Dust. The endless, monotonous hunger of the dead. A king of ashes, presiding over a court of fools. Another groan, deeper this time, rumbled in his chest. The frozen zombies twitched in unison. A distant sound broke the silence. Not a moan, but a sharp crack, followed by a muffled shout. Human sounds. They came from the north, beyond the plaza, where the shell of a department store leaned precariously against an office tower. Leo's head turned. The psychic command shifted. The frozen horde around the plaza began to shuffle, then lurch, moving as one entity toward the source of the noise. He didn't will them to attack with any particular malice. It was simply what they did. It was background noise. His attention was elsewhere, on the faint, tantalizing echo of living fear, which at least was a different flavor of sensation. He descended the dais steps and followed at a distance, a solitary monarch trailing his mindless army. The zombies funneled into a narrow street leading toward the department store. Leo paused at the corner, leaning against crumbling brick. He could see the hideout now, a barricaded second-floor window of the store, reinforced with shelving units and debris. Figures moved behind it. Survivors. 3, maybe 4. They were firing down through a gap in the barricade, the pops of their guns sharp and desperate. His horde pressed against the building's ground floor, pounding on metal shutters, clawing at concrete. Leo watched, his intelligent eyes cataloging the futility. The survivors had maybe minutes. Then the horde would find a way in, or simply pile up until they reached the window. It was a boring equation. His hunger for a peach intensified, absurdly. Then, the air above the fray shimmered. It was a distortion at first, a heat haze effect in the cool morning. Then it coalesced into a sphere about the size of a human head. It pulsed with a sickly, unstable light, violet, green, and static white. Glitching, corrupted data streams, visible like faulty holograms, skittered across its surface. The system core. It emitted a low, electronic hum that set Leo's teeth on edge and made the nearby zombies stagger as if disoriented. The survivors saw it too. Their firing ceased for a moment, replaced by confused shouts. The orb hovered, spinning slowly, a tear in reality's fabric. For Leo, the sight triggered something primal, but not the mindless hunger of his lesser kin. This was different. The orb glowed. It shimmered. It was new. In a world of grey decay and bland flesh, it was a burst of impossible color and sound. And more than that, a deep, instinctual part of him, the part that was patient zero, the origin point of this ruin, recognized it. This thing was connected to the emptiness, to the hunger, to the very rules of this broken world. His own craving, for taste, for sensation, for something real, merged with a surge of kingly frustration. This glitching anomaly was in his domain. It was an irritant. It was, maybe edible. With a speed that belied his stiff-limbed shamble, Leo pushed off from the wall and lurched into the street. His psychic hold on the horde tightened, not to command them, but to clear a path. The zombies directly between him and the orb stumbled aside, creating a corridor through the press of bodies. The survivors, peering down, saw a single figure, different from the rest, moving with purpose toward the shimmering anomaly. They held their fire, gripped by a terror beyond that of the horde. Leo reached the spot beneath the orb. It hung 10 feet in the air, humming and glitching. He didn't pause. He leaped. His body was stronger than it looked. He soared upward, pale hands outstretched. His fingers closed around the core. It was cold and hot at once, vibrating violently. The corrupted data streams lashed at his arms like electric whips. A jolt of pure, chaotic information, error messages, corrupted code, the screaming logic of a dying AI, flooded his mind. He ignored it. He was hunger incarnate. He pulled the orb to his face and, with a sound that was half groan, half roar of triumph, bit into it. It didn't crunch like glass or squish like fruit. It dissolved into a cascade of light and energy, pouring into him. He swallowed, and the world flickered. He landed on the street, crouched. The last of the light vanished into his mouth. For a second, there was silence, broken only by the moans of the horde and the panicked breathing from the hideout. Then, power awoke. It wasn't a physical sensation. It was a new layer of perception. He could see the rules. The law of gravity holding the zombies to the ground. The simple directive of consume driving their movements. The structural integrity of the crumbling buildings. They appeared in his mind's eye not as concepts, but as lines of text, as editable code. And he was the administrator. The Glitch King's authority. The horde, momentarily confused by the core's disappearance, renewed its assault on the building with mindless fervor. A zombie clambered onto the shoulders of another, reaching for the window barricade. Annoyance flared in Leo. This noise was disturbing his contemplation of this incredible, hunger-sating power. He wanted them to stop. He wanted them to go away. A childish, frustrated thought crossed his mind, why don't you all just slip and fall? He focused on the cluster of zombies at the base of the wall. He didn't know how to use the power, he simply willed it. He reached out with his new sense and edited. Localized surface friction, set to 0. A minor mental strain, a brief headache-like pressure behind his eyes. The cost. The effect was instantaneous and absurd. The ground beneath the feet of the 24 zombies closest to the wall became impossibly slick. Not with ice or oil, but with a fundamental lack of traction. As one, their feet shot out from under them. They fell not with the slow collapse of the dead, but with the comical, flailing chaos of cartoon characters on a banana peel. A tangle of limbs and rotting bodies piled up, limbs waving uselessly in the air. The zombie reaching for the window lost its footing and plummeted back into the squirming heap. The assault on the barricade ceased completely, replaced by a scene of ludicrous impotence. Up in the hideout, the survivors stared, their weapons forgotten. One of them, a young woman with a scarf tied over her mouth, pointed a trembling finger. Did you see that? The ground, they fell. It's a miracle, whispered an older man beside her, making a sign on his chest. Divine intervention. Something protected us. That one, the woman said, her eyes locked on Leo, who was still crouched in the street, looking at his own hands in wonder. The one that ate the light. He did it. He saved us. Their whispers, full of awe and terror, reached Leo's keen ears. He looked up at them. Saved them? He'd just been annoyed. He just wanted a moment's peace to think about, peaches. He groaned softly, a sound of profound confusion. The survivors flinched, then bowed their heads slightly, interpreting the groan as a decree of satisfaction, a god acknowledging his work. They began gathering their things in a frantic, reverent rush. We have to go. Report this. To the last bastion, the older man hissed. But the prophecy, the woman started. This is it. The sign. Now, move. They vanished from the window, fleeing deeper into the building, their footsteps echoing away. Leo paid their escape little mind. He was engrossed. He flexed his will again, experimentally. He focused on a single, slumped zombie trying to rise from the pile. He nerfed its strength, reducing the force its muscles could exert to that of a newborn kitten. The zombie's arms buckled, and it face-planted back into the muck with a pathetic squelch. Another minor mental twinge. So, he could edit attributes. He could change rules. The possibilities were distracting. Could he edit the rules of flavor? Could he make a rock taste like steak? His hunger, momentarily forgotten in the rush of power, returned with a vengeance. A real meal. That was the goal. This power was a tool. A magnificent, world-breaking tool for the most mundane of quests. As he pondered the culinary applications of reality warping, a new sound cut through the post-fracas silence. It was a roar. But not the dry, rasping roar of his mindless subjects. This was deeper, wetter, layered with a grinding, metallic subharmonic. It echoed from the southern end of the long street, the direction opposite the fleeing survivors. It was a sound of immense, corrupted power. Leo turned. In the distance, shambling around a corner, a figure appeared. It was massive, twice the size of the largest zombie in his horde. Its flesh was not just gray, but streaked with pulsating, neon-blue veins that glowed with an inner light. Jagged, crystalline growths of corrupted data protruded from its shoulders and spine. Its eyes burned with the same unstable violet energy as the system core had. Data streams, visible and glitching, writhed around its form like ethereal chains. It moved with a ponderous, terrifying purpose, each footfall cracking the asphalt. It was looking right at him. It had felt the core's energy being consumed. It was drawn to it. A mutated alpha zombie. And in its gaze, Leo saw not mindless hunger, but a savage, alien intelligence, and a resistance to the psychic command he wielded over the common horde. This was not part of his kingdom. This was an invader. The alpha roared again, the sound shaking dust from the ruins. It began to advance, its data streams flaring brightly. Leo stood his ground, the bored king forgotten. Before him was a threat. Before him was also, he realized with a spark of his old, intelligent curiosity, a problem. And for the first time since awakening in this ruin, Leo was not bored at all. The mutated alpha zombie's roar still echoed in Leo's mind as he retreated from the ruined street. Its hulking form, shimmering with data streams like corrupted neon veins, had advanced with a purpose that felt alien to the mindless hunger of ordinary zombies. For the first time since awakening as Patient Zero, something had resisted his psychic command. Not completely, he could still feel the tug of connection, like trying to hold a greased rope, but enough to make his teeth ache with frustration. He needed space. The city sprawled around him, a graveyard of concrete and steel where his hordes shuffled through perpetual twilight. His thoughts, sharp and clear despite the decaying flesh that housed them, fixated on two problems, the alpha's resistance, and his own gnawing hunger. Not for the bland, stringy human flesh his zombies consumed with mindless fervor, the memory of peaches, their sweet juice and firm flesh, haunted him like a ghost of a life he couldn't remember. The Glitch King's authority hummed in his consciousness, a new layer of perception overlaying reality. He could almost see the world's rules as faint, shimmering lines of code, the physics of gravity, the biology of decay, the simple AI-like directives that drove zombie behavior. With a thought, he could tweak them. The slip-and-fall incident had proven that. But at what cost? The headache that followed had been a dull throb behind his eyes, a warning he couldn't ignore. An abandoned supermarket loomed ahead, its shattered windows like empty eye sockets. The sign, half-torn, still read, "Fresh Produce," in faded letters. Irony, Leo thought, if he still had a sense of humor. He pushed through the broken sliding doors, the glass crunching underfoot. Inside, the air smelled of dust, mildew, and the faint, sweet decay of forgotten food. Shelves lay toppled like fallen dominoes. Cans were scattered everywhere, some dented, some pristine, their labels promising beans, soup, fruit. Leo's gaze locked on a single can near the checkout counter. The label showed a golden peach slice floating in syrup. His mouth watered, a physiological response that felt absurd in his undead body. Between him and the can, a lone zombie shambled. It was a standard model, tattered business suit, one shoe missing, jaw hanging slack. It hadn't noticed him yet, too busy bumping into a shelf over and over, its programming stuck in a loop. Leo's innate psychic command whispered to it, leave. The zombie paused, twitched, then resumed its pointless collision. Not resistant like the alpha, just glitchy. The system's corruption at work. Fine. Time for a test. Leo focused on the zombie. The Glitch King's authority activated, and the world's rules became editable text in his mind. He found the line governing physical strength, zombie_strength equals 5, base. With a mental nudge, he changed it to zombie_strength equals 0. The effort felt like squeezing a thought through syrup. His headache returned, sharper this time, a spike of pressure behind his temples. The zombie collapsed. Not dramatically, but comically, its legs simply gave out, and it flopped to the floor like a marionette with cut strings. It lay there, arms twitching, unable to push itself up. 0 strength meant it couldn't even lift its own weight. Leo stared, a strange satisfaction warring with the throbbing in his skull. The can of peaches was now unguarded. He took a step forward, then froze. Voices echoed from the street outside, human voices, tense and whispering. Scavengers. He could sense them through the psychic web that connected him to his horde, a prickling awareness of living minds nearby. 4 of them. They were heading toward the supermarket. Leo retreated into the shadows behind a toppled freezer unit. The last thing he needed was a confrontation. These weren't the terrified survivors from yesterday, these sounded organized, armed. He could summon his horde, but that would draw attention, and the alpha was still out there somewhere, a wild card he didn't understand. Plus, fighting meant noise, chaos, and 0 chance of getting that peach can. The scavengers entered, fanning out with practiced caution. 3 men and 1 woman, all clad in patched-up tactical gear. The leader was a young man with a determined set to his jaw, a makeshift spear in his hands. Leo pegged him as brave but naive, his eyes scanned the shadows too quickly, missing the deeper darkness where Leo lurked. Clear the aisles, the leader whispered. Look for meds, canned goods. Vance says the prophet's blessing might be here. Prophet, Leo thought. Great. More misinterpretations. The group spread out. One of them, a lanky man with a backpack, headed straight for the checkout counter, and the peach can. Leo's hunger surged. He couldn't let them take it. But attacking would shatter any hope of subtlety. Another test. A different rule. Leo focused on the leader. The Glitch King's authority shimmered, and he found the attribute for luck, survivor_luck equals 2, neutral. He boosted it to survivor_luck equals 10, extreme. The mental strain was worse this time, not just a headache, but a hollow ache in his gut, as if the power draw was feeding on his already ravenous body. His hunger pangs intensified, a sharp, twisting need that made his hands tremble. The leader, moving to check behind a shelf, tripped. Not over debris, but over a hidden can of peaches that had rolled into his path. He went down with a yelp, his spear clattering. The noise echoed through the silent store. Jake, the woman hissed, rushing to his side. I'm fine, Jake muttered, rubbing his knee. He picked up the can he tripped over. His eyes widened. Peaches. Full. Not a dent. The other scavengers gathered around. That's impossible, the lanky one said. We swept this area last week. There was nothing here. Jake looked around, his expression shifting from pain to awe. It's a sign. The prophet, he's watching. Protecting us. Leo rolled his eyes internally. I just wanted you to fall, not start a religion. The group began whispering prayers, leaving small offerings from their packs, a protein bar, a bottle of water, a wrapped piece of jerky, on the checkout counter next to the peach can. Then, with reverent nods, they retreated, slipping back into the street. Leo waited until their footsteps faded. The hunger was a live wire in his veins now, worse than before. He stumbled out of hiding, snatched the peach can and the offerings, and retreated to a back storage room. The jerky was tough, the protein bar chalky, but they dulled the edge of his need. The peach can, though, he stared at it, his fingers tracing the label. Not yet. He'd save it for when he could truly enjoy it. He was about to leave when a sound froze him. A faint whisper, barely audible, from the front of the store. One scavenger had stayed behind, the lanky man, crouched behind a shelf. He had a small radio in his hand. The prophet is real, the man whispered into it, his voice trembling with fervor. Sighted at the old market. Left blessings. Confirmed. Static crackled in response, then a voice, understood. Tracking. Maintain distance. The man fled, his footsteps hurried. Leo stood in the darkness, the peach can cold in his hands. He extended his psychic senses, not toward his zombies, but toward the web of human presence. Faint, distant minds, watchers, positioned on rooftops, in windows, all reporting in. A network. They were tracking him. The Alpha's roar echoed in the distance, closer now. And somewhere, the system's corruption spread, its data streams weaving new threats. Leo's facade as the terrifying Glitch King felt thinner by the second, stretched over a hunger that never ceased in a world that kept bowing for all the wrong reasons. The morning sun filtered through the skeletal remains of skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt where Leo stood. His stomach growled with a hollow emptiness that no amount of human flesh could satisfy. The memory of that single peach can from yesterday's scavenger encounter had only sharpened his craving. Real food. Something with flavor, texture, warmth. Not the bland, cold meat his zombie hordes mindlessly consumed. He'd heard whispers on the psychic currents that flowed through his domain, rumors carried by fleeing survivors about food caches in the industrial district to the north. Canned goods, preserved supplies, maybe even something fresh if he was lucky. With a mental sigh that manifested as a low groan, Leo began walking, his movements unnaturally smooth for something that should have been shambling. As he moved through the ruined streets, he became increasingly aware of the eyes watching him. Not the dead, glassy stares of his zombie subjects, those he could feel psychically, a sea of simple hunger in his mind, but living eyes. Hidden in broken windows, behind collapsed walls, perched on rooftops. Survivors. They'd been tracking him since yesterday's supermarket incident, and now their attention felt like pinpricks on his consciousness. Leo paused at an intersection where rainwater had collected in a massive crater. The water reflected the gray sky above, and for a moment, he considered trying to edit reality to purify it into something drinkable. But the mental fatigue from yesterday's experiment still lingered as a dull ache behind his eyes. The Glitch King's authority came with costs, and he was learning to measure them carefully. Instead, he focused on clearing his path. The road ahead was choked with debris, overturned vehicles, collapsed signage, the skeletal remains of what might have been a bus. With a thought that felt like pushing against a heavy door, Leo reached for his new power. He didn't want to move the debris physically. That would require too much concentration, too much of that precious mental energy. Instead, he edited a simple rule of local physics, gravity's direction. Not for everything, just for the water in the crater and the smaller pieces of rubble. The effect was absurd. Rainwater began rising from the crater in shimmering droplets, defying gravity to float upward like reversed rain. Small chunks of concrete and twisted metal followed, lifting from the street in a lazy, dreamlike ascent. The larger debris remained grounded, but a clear path opened before him. From a third-story window half a block away, a survivor with binoculars gasped. Leo heard the sharp intake of breath, followed by frantic whispering. He's making the rain fall upward. The prophet is clearing his path. Another groan escaped Leo's lips, this one born of genuine frustration at the continuing misunderstanding. He was just trying to get to potential food without tripping over rubble. But to the hidden watchers, it sounded like a divine decree. He heard scribbling, then the crackle of a radio. Subject has demonstrated control over natural forces, a voice whispered into a transmitter. Rain reversal observed at grid 7. Possible divine intervention classification. Leo shook his head, the motion sending a fresh wave of hunger pangs through his undead body. He continued northward, the floating debris and water droplets creating an eerie, beautiful trail behind him. More radios crackled to life along his route, a network of human surveillance tracking his every move, interpreting every sound. When he groaned at a particularly sharp hunger pang, a watcher on a rooftop whispered into his radio, "The prophet has spoken. Let the path be clear for the chosen." That's what he said. When he sighed at the mental effort of maintaining the gravity edit, another voice reported, "Divine decree, the burden of creation weighs upon me." Recording for theological analysis. It was maddening. And worse, it was boring. Leo had been patient zero for what felt like an eternity, commanding mindless hordes with psychic ease. Now he had reality-altering powers, and all anyone wanted was to misinterpret them. He craved stimulation, challenge, something to break the monotony beyond his endless hunger. He found it 2 hours later. The industrial district's outskirts were marked by chain-link fences topped with barbed wire, most of it torn down or rusted through. Beyond them stood warehouses and factories, their windows broken, their walls scarred with fire and combat. And at the center of it all, a fortified outpost. Humans had taken over what appeared to have been a shipping company's distribution center. They'd reinforced the walls with sheet metal and sandbags, erected watchtowers at the corners, and cleared a killing field around the perimeter. Currently, that killing field was occupied by approximately 36 zombies. Leo felt them psychically, simple, hungry presences mindlessly throwing themselves against the barricades. The humans inside were firing down from the walls, but their ammunition seemed limited. He could hear shouted commands, the panicked cries of the besieged. For a moment, Leo considered simply walking around. The food caches were rumored to be in the warehouses beyond the outpost. He had no particular investment in these humans' survival. But then his eyes caught movement on one of the watchtowers, a child, no more than 10 years old, peering over the edge with wide, terrified eyes. And he was so very bored. With another mental sigh that the watchers would undoubtedly record as profound wisdom, Leo approached the siege. The zombies ignored him. They were his subjects, after all, psychically bound to his will. But these were particularly mindless ones, driven by base hunger rather than any coordinated purpose. The humans on the walls noticed him immediately. "Something's approaching from the south," a voice shouted. "It's not attacking the dead. They're ignoring it. Prophet sightings have been reported in this sector. Could it be?" Leo stopped at the edge of the killing field, studying the situation. The zombies were clustered around the main gate, pounding against reinforced metal. Others were attempting to scale the walls, their decaying fingers finding purchase in the rough surfaces. The humans' gunfire was growing sporadic, they were running low. He could simply command the zombies to leave. That would be the easiest solution, requiring only a psychic nudge. But that would reveal his control over the hordes, and the watchers were definitely observing this. The prophet myth was troublesome enough without adding Zombie King to his growing list of misinterpreted attributes. Instead, he reached for the Glitch King's authority. The thought came to him as he remembered yesterday's experiment with the supermarket zombie, the one he'd nerfed to 0 strength. But that had been a single target, and the mental cost had been noticeable. Doing that to 36 zombies at once, the headache would be excruciating. Then a stray, hungry thought drifted through his mind, "I wish they'd just float away." And the power responded. It wasn't a conscious command so much as a daydream given form. Leo imagined the zombies lifting off the ground, weightless, harmless. He didn't edit their strength or speed. He didn't command them to leave. He simply changed a local rule of physics. Specifically, he edited the relationship between mass and gravitational attraction within a 50-meter radius centered on the outpost's main gate. The effect was instantaneous and absurd. One moment, zombies were pounding against metal, climbing walls, snarling with mindless hunger. The next, they began floating upward as if someone had turned off gravity just for them. Their decaying limbs flailed in empty air. Their snarls turned to confused, guttural sounds. They rose in a scattered cluster, drifting upward like grotesque balloons released at some macabre festival. The gunfire from the walls ceased entirely. For 3 heartbeats, there was only silence broken by the faint sounds of floating zombies groaning and the distant crackle of radios from hidden watchers. Then the humans inside the outpost erupted into cheers. "He saved us. The prophet. It's the prophet from the broadcasts. Praise be. He's real." Leo felt the mental drain immediately, a sharp, stabbing pain behind his eyes that made his vision swim. He swayed slightly on his feet, the hunger in his stomach momentarily forgotten beneath the wave of fatigue. Maintaining the edit was costing him, but he held it for another 30 seconds, watching as the zombies floated up to about 20 meters before he released the effect. Gravity reasserted itself. The zombies fell in a raining, crashing heap well beyond the outpost's walls, landing in a tangled, broken pile that twitched but didn't immediately rise. They'd survive the fall, undead resilience saw to that, but they'd be disoriented long enough for the humans to regroup. The main gate of the outpost creaked open. A man in patched military fatigues stepped out, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Behind him, other survivors peered out, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. "Thank you," the man said, his voice trembling slightly. "We were almost overrun. Our supplies, we can offer you tribute. Food." The word cut through Leo's mental fatigue. He nodded, the motion stiff. The man gestured, and 2 younger survivors hurried forward with a crate. They set it at Leo's feet, then backed away quickly. Leo looked down at the contents: military rations in foil packets, a few cans with faded labels, bottled water. Stale, processed, bland, but food. Real food, not flesh. He took the crate, his movements deliberate. The humans watched with bated breath as he examined a can of what appeared to be beans. Not peaches. Not even close. But edible. As he turned to leave, the man in fatigues called after him. Wait. We have a messenger ready. We'll send word to the last bastion. They need to know the Glitch King walks among us. Leo didn't respond. He simply walked away, crate in hand, heading toward the warehouses where better food might await. Behind him, he heard the outpost gate close, followed by excited voices and the sound of a motorcycle engine starting. The messenger. He found a relatively intact warehouse an hour later, the crate of rations tucked under one arm. Inside, among moldering cardboard boxes and rusted machinery, he discovered a few treasures: cans of fruit cocktail, with peaches, a sealed jar of pickles, even a dented but intact can of corned beef. He sat on an overturned crate, opened the fruit cocktail first, and ate slowly, savoring the syrupy sweetness. The mental fatigue from the gravity edit lingered, but the food helped. As he ate, he listened to the psychic currents, the radio chatter, the movements in his domain. The messenger had reached the last bastion fortress. Excitement was building. The Glitch King had performed another miracle. He was finishing the corned beef when he felt the approach. Not zombies, their psychic presence was different. Humans. Several of them, moving with purpose rather than fear. Leo stood, wiping his hands on his ruined clothing. He stepped out of the warehouse into the late afternoon light. 4 humans approached, led by a woman with determined eyes and practical clothing. She carried no visible weapon, but her posture spoke of someone who knew how to use one. Behind her walked 3 others, 2 men with the wary stance of soldiers, and between them, a younger man who looked vaguely familiar. The lanky survivor from yesterday. The one with the radio. The woman stopped 10 meters away, her eyes taking in Leo's appearance without flinching. When she spoke, her voice was clear and measured. I am Mia, envoy of the last bastion. Commander Vance has sent me with a formal offer. She gestured, and one of the soldiers stepped forward, placing a larger crate on the ground between them. Tribute. The finest supplies we have. Leo looked at the crate, then back at Mia. Her expression was earnest, hopeful. And a plea, she continued, her voice dropping slightly. The true evil is not the dead. It's the corruption spreading from the system that created them. It's creating new monsters, twisting reality itself. We need your help. We need an alliance. She met his eyes, and in that moment, Leo saw not worship or fear, but something more dangerous, genuine belief. She thought he was their prophesied savior. And the crate at her feet undoubtedly contained more food. He groaned softly, a sound of pure frustration at the deepening misunderstanding. Mia's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at the lanky man, who was scribbling frantically in a notebook. Then she nodded as if she'd understood something profound. We hear your wisdom, Glitch King, she said. And we accept. The industrial district's perpetual gloom deepened as afternoon shadows stretched across cracked asphalt. Leo sat on an overturned steel drum in what he'd claimed as his makeshift lair, a partially collapsed warehouse with one wall open to the elements. Rainwater from his earlier gravity editing stunt still dripped from exposed beams, creating rhythmic puddles around crates of military rations and canned goods. His hunger, a constant companion since awakening, had taken on new dimensions. The blandness of human flesh no longer appealed, instead, his mind fixated on the memory of peaches, their sweet tang haunting him like a forgotten melody. He was prying open a can of fruit cocktail with stiff fingers when the scent reached him. It wasn't food, not exactly. But it carried notes of something clean and human beneath the expected odors of sweat, fear, and survival. Lavender soap, perhaps, or some herb survivors had managed to cultivate. And beneath that, the unmistakable aroma of preserved meats and spices from approaching containers. Leo's deadened senses, heightened by his patient zero physiology and the Glitch King's authority, catalogued each component: smoked sausage, dried apples, something vinegary like pickles, and, was that cinnamon? He set down the can, the metal clinking against concrete. Through the warehouse's gaping wall, he watched the convoy approach. 3 vehicles, a battered pickup truck leading 2 armored personnel carriers with last bastion insignia painted hastily on their sides, rolled to a stop 50 yards out. The engines cut, and for a moment, only the distant moans of his horde filled the silence. Then doors opened, and humans emerged. Leo counted 12, all armed but with weapons lowered in what they likely considered a gesture of peace. Their movements were cautious, reverent even. They formed a loose perimeter as one figure stepped forward from the lead truck. Mia. Even from this distance, Leo recognized her from their brief encounter at the outpost. She moved with a survivor's economy of motion, but there was a straightness to her posture that spoke of courage rather than bravado. Her dark hair was tied back, revealing a face smudged with grime but eyes that scanned the warehouse with intelligent assessment. She carried no visible weapon, only a satchel slung across her shoulder. And that scent, clean and human and utterly distracting, wrapped around her like a banner. She approached alone, her boots crunching on broken glass. The other humans remained at the vehicles, unloading crates and stacking them in a neat pyramid. Leo's eyes tracked the containers. His stomach, or whatever passed for it in his undead physiology, clenched with something beyond hunger, anticipation. Mia stopped at the warehouse threshold, her shadow falling across the debris-strewn floor. She took a breath, her hands trembling slightly before she stilled them. Then she knelt. Not a combat crouch. A full kneel, one knee touching concrete, head bowed. The gesture was so foreign in this world of constant threat that Leo almost laughed. Almost. Great One, she began, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet. Prophet of the broken world. Glitch King who walks among the fallen. Leo remained motionless on his steel drum. He could feel the mental strain of maintaining his passive psychic command over the nearby horde, a background hum in his consciousness, but this was different. This required thought. The last bastion sends tribute, Mia continued, raising her head but keeping her eyes lowered. We have preserved what beauty remains in this broken age. Fruits from greenhouse gardens that survived the collapse. Meat smoked by our oldest hunters. Spices traded from the southern caravans before the routes fell silent. She gestured toward the crates. One of the humans at the vehicles opened a container, revealing rows of glass jars filled with amber-colored preserves. The sunlight, weak as it was, caught the contents and made them glow. Peaches. Leo's fingers twitched. The hunger surged, a physical pain that started behind his eyes and spread through his decaying frame. He wanted to lunge across the distance, smash the jars open, and devour their contents. But another part of him, the hyper-intelligent part that remembered being human, that understood consequences, held him back. If he moved, if he revealed his true nature as nothing more than a hungry zombie with reality-bending powers, the tribute would stop. The worship would turn to fear. The fragile alliance that might lead to more food, to hot meals instead of cold cans, would shatter. Mia was speaking again, her voice gaining strength. Commander Vance believes you are the guardian foretold in our oldest records. The one who will mend the broken rules of this world. Who will stand against the corruption spreading from the system's heart. She looked up now, meeting his eyes. Hers were brown, flecked with green, and held no fear, only earnest belief. We don't ask for miracles, Great One. Only that you consider our allegiance. That you allow us to serve as your hands in this world, while you attend to higher matters. Higher matters. Like finding decent food. Like stopping the spreading corruption that threatened to make even canned peaches unavailable. Leo's mind raced. He needed to respond. Needed to maintain the facade. But speaking, actual speech with his decaying vocal cords, was impossible. The best he could manage were groans, and those would hardly convey divine wisdom. Unless. He focused on the Glitch King's authority. Not on rewriting major rules of reality, but on something small. Localized. Cheap in terms of mental cost. He pictured the air around him vibrating, amplifying, shaping sound without the need for proper vocalization. He thought of echoes in cathedral spaces, of how a whisper could carry when conditions were right. A headache began behind his eyes, mild, manageable. The price of even this minor editing. He opened his mouth, let out a low groan that started in his chest, and willed the air to shape it. Bring. The tribute. The words didn't come from his throat. They seemed to emanate from the warehouse itself, from the shadows between beams, from the puddles on the floor. They echoed, layering over themselves, gaining weight and resonance until they felt less like speech and more like a force of nature. Mia's eyes widened. She didn't flinch, but her breath caught. Behind her, the humans at the vehicles froze, some making warding gestures, others bowing their heads. Leo gestured with one stiff hand toward the space before him. Mia recovered quickly, turning to signal the others. They began carrying crates forward, stacking them carefully 10 feet from Leo's position. The peach preserves went on top, catching the light. Next came smoked sausages wrapped in cloth, jars of pickled vegetables, even a small container of what looked like honey. When the last crate was placed, the humans retreated to their vehicles. Only Mia remained, kneeling again. Leo's hunger screamed at him. The peaches glistened. The sausages smelled of wood smoke and sage. He wanted to tear into them now, to feel real flavor on his deadened tongue. But the facade. The myth. He groaned again, shaping the air. 1. Stays. Mia looked up. Great one. You. Leo put force behind the edited sound, making the single word vibrate in the chests of everyone present. Interpreter. Your eyes see what others miss. It was nonsense, really. But Mia's face transformed with understanding. She nodded, her expression solemn. You wish me to remain? To translate your wisdom for my people? Leo didn't respond. He simply stared, letting the silence stretch. I am honored, she whispered, then louder, I accept this duty, Glitch King. She rose, moving to stand slightly to his left and behind him, a position of service, but close enough that her scent of lavender and human warmth washed over him. Distracting. Maddening. Leo reached for the nearest crate. His movements were stiff, unnatural, but he forced himself to move slowly. Deliberately. He selected a jar of peaches, unscrewed the lid with careful turns, and brought it to his face. The scent was overwhelming, sweet, floral, with the tang of preservation. He dipped 2 fingers into the syrup, withdrew a slice of peach, and placed it in his mouth. Flavor exploded. Not the muted, canned approximation from earlier. This was brighter, richer, with hints of the tree it came from and the care with which it had been preserved. The syrup was thick with sugar, coating his dead taste buds and awakening something primal. For a moment, the hunger receded, replaced by satisfaction so profound it felt like pain. He made a sound, a low, involuntary groan of pleasure. Beside him, Mia scrambled for her satchel, pulling out a notebook and pencil. She began writing furiously. The prophet consumes the fruit of remembrance, she murmured as she wrote. His voice holds the pleasure of creation renewed. A sign that life persists, that sweetness remains in the world for those who follow the proper paths. Leo almost choked on the peach slice. He hadn't meant to groan. Hadn't meant to give any sign at all. But the misinterpretation was already cementing itself in her mind, in her notes that would become scripture for the last bastion. He ate another slice, then another, forcing himself to slow down. To make the jar last. Each groan of pleasure, each involuntary reaction to real food after so long, was met with more frantic writing from Mia. The Glitch King finds favor in our offerings, she whispered, her pencil scratching. The preserved summer fruit pleases him, symbolizing the endurance of hope through winter's long night. By the time Leo finished the jar, Mia had filled 3 pages. The other humans watched from the vehicles, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. Reports were already being radioed. Leo could sense the transmissions buzzing through the air, could almost hear the watchers in their hidden positions relaying every detail. The myth was growing. Deepening. Becoming something he could no longer control. He set the empty jar aside, reached for a smoked sausage. Bit into it. The flavors of sage and garlic and proper smoking, not the chemical approximation in military rations, filled his mouth. Another groan escaped him. Mia wrote, the prophet consumes the flesh of the faithful hunt, honoring the sacrifice of those who provide. His approval signals that the old ways, hunting, gathering, preserving, are blessed in this new age. Leo closed his eyes. The mental strain of maintaining the voice editing was minimal but constant, a dull throb behind his eyes. The satisfaction from real food warred with the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, Patient Zero, Zombie King, with reality-altering powers that could rewrite local physics, and he was reduced to performing for an audience while they misinterpreted his basic biological reactions as divine wisdom. And yet, the food was good. Better than anything he'd tasted since awakening. And there was more in the crates. And if he played this role correctly, there might be hot meals. Cooked food. Fresh bread, maybe. Stews simmered over fires. The hunger, momentarily sated by peaches and sausage, returned with new specificity. It wanted warmth. It wanted complexity. It wanted a meal that didn't come from a can or a jar. He finished the sausage, wiped his hands on his ruined pants, and turned his head slightly toward Mia. She immediately stopped writing, pencil poised, waiting. He groaned, shaping the air. Speak of threats. Mia nodded, tucking her notebook away. The corruption spreads, Great One. From the place where the system core first manifested. It twists the fallen, making them stronger. More organized. We've lost 3 scout parties to coordinated attacks, not mindless hordes, but tactical strikes. She hesitated, then continued. And there are, new things. Not zombies as we knew them. Beasts with data streams flickering around them. One attacked our western outpost yesterday. It took concentrated fire to bring it down, and even then, its body dissolved into light and code. The mutated alpha zombie. The one from the first day, drawn by the system energy when Leo ate the core. It had been stalking him, growing stronger, spreading its corruption. The beast nears, Leo edited, the words echoing. Mia's eyes widened. You've seen it? Leo didn't answer. Instead, he reached out with his psychic senses, feeling for his horde. The mindless zombies under his control numbered in the hundreds within a mile radius, their simple hungers like background noise in his mind. But there were gaps. Places where his control slipped. Where something else was exerting influence. He focused on the nearest gap, a cluster of zombies 2 blocks east. Normally, they would be shambling toward human scent or simply standing inert. But they were moving with purpose. Heading west. Toward the warehouse. And leading them was a presence that felt like static. Like corrupted code. Like the system core's energy turned malignant and hungry. The Alpha. Leo stood abruptly, the steel drum scraping against concrete. Mia stepped back, her hand going to a knife at her belt before she forced it down. Night was falling. The already dim light of the industrial district faded to deep twilight, shadows pooling in the ruins. In the distance, a new sound joined the usual moans of the horde, a deeper, more guttural roar that vibrated through the ground. The humans at the vehicles heard it too. Weapons came up, safeties clicked off. They formed a defensive circle, eyes scanning the gathering darkness. Leo felt the corruption spreading through his psychic network. Zombies that should have been under his complete control were slipping from his grasp, their simple minds overwritten by something more aggressive, more intelligent. The Alpha wasn't just resistant to his nerfs, it was learning. Adapting. Turning his own horde against him. Mia moved closer, her voice low. Great One. What do you command? Leo didn't answer. He was calculating mental costs. How much strain would it take to nerf an entire advancing group? To edit their strength to 0 as he had with the single zombie in the supermarket? And what if the Alpha resisted? What if his authority failed against this spreading corruption? The roar came again, closer this time. From the east. Accompanied by the sound of shambling feet moving in unison, not the random drag of mindless zombies, but the coordinated march of something being directed. The crates of food sat between him and the approaching threat. The peaches he hadn't yet tasted. The honey. The spices. And beside him, Mia waited for wisdom. For a divine command. Leo felt the first true flicker of something beyond boredom or hunger. Something that might have been concern. Or responsibility. Or the beginning of a very long, very troublesome commitment to people who thought he was their god. The night air hung thick with the scent of ozone and decay, a metallic tang that clung to the back of Leo's throat. He stood on the cracked asphalt of what had once been a parking lot, the remnants of Mia's tribute spread around him, empty cans of peaches gleaming dully in the moonlight, wax paper from smoked sausages fluttering in the breeze. His hunger, a constant companion, gnawed at him with renewed vigor, but it was the psychic disturbance that truly commanded his attention. For days, his innate control over the mindless hordes had been absolute. A thought, a whisper of intent, and they would shuffle or halt, disperse or converge. Now, that control frayed at the edges like rotten cloth. The psychic threads that connected him to the zombies in the surrounding ruins trembled, vibrating with a foreign frequency. It felt like static, a glitching, corrupted signal that made his temples throb. Mia knelt nearby, her head bowed as she scribbled in a leather-bound journal. She had misinterpreted his earlier groans of hunger as divine contemplation, and now she documented every twitch of his fingers, every shift of his weight, as sacred scripture. Her faith was a palpable thing, a warm, annoying glow in the periphery of his awareness. He could feel her devotion like a physical pressure, and it made the headache worse. Then the ground shook. It started as a faint tremor, a vibration that traveled up through the asphalt and into the soles of Leo's boots. The scattered zombies in the distance, those still under his command, let out a collective moan, a sound of confusion and fear that was entirely new. Mia looked up, her eyes wide. "My lord," she whispered, her voice trembling. Leo didn't answer. He focused inward, reaching out with his psychic senses. The corruption was a spreading stain, a digital rot that seeped through the psychic network. And at its center, moving with deliberate, earth-shaking strides, was the source. It emerged from the shadow of a collapsed office building, a monstrosity that dwarfed the standard shamblers. This was the Alpha Zombie, a hulking beast that stood nearly 12 feet tall, its flesh a patchwork of necrotic tissue and shimmering data streams. Blue-white lines of light flickered across its skin like faulty circuitry, pulsing in time with its movements. One of its arms ended in a cluster of jagged, crystalline growths that gleamed with an inner light, while the other was a mass of fused bone and metal. Its eyes glowed with the same corrupted energy, fixed unerringly on Leo. Behind it trailed a wave of enhanced zombies, dozens of them, their movements sharper, more coordinated. They didn't shamble, they loped, their eyes flickering with faint echoes of the Alpha's data streams. The corruption had given them a crude semblance of intelligence, and they moved like a pack, flanking the Alpha on either side. Leo's first instinct was command. He reached out with his innate psychic authority, the kingly control that had been his since awakening. The order was simple, primal: halt. Nothing happened. The Alpha didn't even slow. It took another ground-shaking step forward, its crystalline arm raising as if in challenge. The enhanced zombies around it hesitated for a fraction of a second, their heads twitching, but then they too continued their advance. The corruption had insulated them, made them resistant. A cold knot tightened in Leo's gut. This wasn't just another mindless drone, this was something the system had forged, something designed to challenge him. Mia scrambled to her feet, her journal forgotten on the ground. By the prophet's light, she breathed, her face pale. "What is that?" Leo ignored her. The headache from maintaining the voice editing flared, a sharp spike of pain behind his eyes. He let the effect drop, his voice would be his own now, a dry, rasping thing. No time for theatrics. He needed focus. The Glitch King's authority stirred within him, a power that felt both alien and intimately familiar. It wasn't like psychic control, it was deeper, more fundamental. It was the ability to reach into the world's code and rewrite a line here, adjust a variable there. But it came at a cost. Every use drained him, left him mentally fatigued and ravenously hungry. And right now, with the Alpha closing the distance, he couldn't afford to be sloppy. The beast was 50 yards away now, close enough that Leo could see the details of its corruption, the way the data streams writhed under its skin like trapped serpents, the jagged cracks in its crystalline arm that leaked viscous, glowing fluid. It let out a roar that was half biological snarl, half digital screech, a sound that set Leo's teeth on edge and made Mia clap her hands over her ears. Time to edit. Leo focused his will, channeling his frustration and hunger into a single, clear thought. The ground beneath the Alpha's feet wasn't asphalt anymore, it was ice, smooth, frictionless, impossibly slippery ice. He didn't just imagine it, he made it so, reaching into the local reality and tweaking the property of the surface. The effect was immediate and absurdly comical. The Alpha, mid-stride, found its massive foot sliding out from under it. Its roar cut off into a surprised grunt as it lost balance, arms windmilling. It crashed to the ground with a sound like a building collapsing, the impact sending cracks radiating through the newly formed ice. The enhanced zombies behind it stumbled, confused, some of them slipping and falling as well. A faint, wheezing sound escaped Leo. It might have been a laugh, if he still remembered how to laugh properly. The mental strain was there, a dull throb in his skull, but it was manageable. For now. The Alpha wasn't done. It pushed itself up, its data streams flaring angrily. The fall hadn't harmed it, its regeneration was already at work, the cracks in its crystalline arm sealing over with fresh growth. It fixed its glowing eyes on Leo and charged again, this time moving with more caution, its steps shorter, more deliberate. Leo edited again. This time, he focused on the air directly in front of the Alpha. He increased the density, made it thick as syrup. The beast's charge slowed, as if pushing through invisible mud. Its movements became labored, strained. But it didn't stop. It was fighting the edit, its corrupted nature resisting the change. The mental strain on Leo increased, the headache sharpened, becoming a pounding rhythm behind his eyes. He could feel his focus wavering, the edges of the edit beginning to fray. He needed something more permanent. Something that would stick. As the alpha broke through the thickened air, now only 20 yards away, Leo dug deeper. He targeted the beast's regeneration, a core attribute, a fundamental rule of its existence. In his mind's eye, he visualized it as a progress bar, a meter that filled rapidly after damage. He reached out with the Glitch King's authority and dragged that bar down. He nerfed it, reducing its efficiency by half, then by 3/4. The effort was immense. It felt like trying to hold up a collapsing ceiling with his bare hands. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and his vision swam with dark spots. The headache exploded into a full-blown migraine, a white-hot pain that made him stagger. He tasted copper in the back of his throat, the psychic feedback of straining his ability to its limits. The alpha felt it too. It stumbled, a pained, guttural sound escaping its maw. The glowing fluid leaking from its arm now dripped freely, sizzling where it hit the ground. The data streams across its skin flickered erratically, some of them winking out entirely. Its charge faltered, and it came to a halt, swaying on its feet. Its glowing eyes met Leo's, and for a moment, there was something there, not intelligence, but a raw, furious recognition of the power being used against it. Then it turned. With a final, defiant roar that was more static than sound, the alpha lumbered away, retreating into the shadows of the ruined city. The enhanced zombies followed, their coordination broken, some of them collapsing as the corruption's hold on them weakened. In moments, they were gone, leaving only the cracked ice, the sizzling patches of glowing fluid, and the ringing silence. Leo sank to one knee, the world tilting around him. The mental fatigue was a physical weight, pressing down on his shoulders. His hunger, momentarily forgotten, returned with a vengeance, a hollow ache that made his hands tremble. He needed food, real food, not the worshipful offerings. But there was nothing here. Just the aftermath of battle. Mia rushed to his side, her face a mask of awe and concern. "My lord. You've driven it back. You've wounded the corruption itself." She fell to her knees beside him, her hands hovering as if afraid to touch him. "Your power, it's beyond anything the prophecies foretold. You edited reality itself to protect us." Leo didn't have the energy to correct her. He let out a low groan, a sound of pure exhaustion and hunger. Mia, of course, misinterpreted it. She nodded fervently, pulling out her journal again. "A decree," she whispered, scribbling furiously. "The corruption shall be slowed, its healing broken. I shall record it for all the Bastion to know." As she wrote, Leo forced himself to look around. The battlefield was a mess. The ice was already melting under the night air, leaving puddles of water mixed with the alpha's glowing fluid. Scattered around were items left by the enhanced zombies, not food, but trinkets. A tarnished locket, a broken watch, a child's toy robot. Offerings, perhaps, from their previous lives, now presented in twisted devotion. Useless. All of it useless. He was about to try standing when Mia's radio, clipped to her belt, crackled to life. The voice that came through was frantic, edged with static and panic. "Mia. Mia, come in. This is Commander Vance. The Bastion is under attack. System-spawned creatures, dozens of them. They came out of nowhere. We're holding, but barely. We need the Glitch King. We need him now. Do you copy? Mia." The message repeated, the desperation in Vance's voice growing with each word. Mia's eyes went wide, her fervent scribbling freezing mid-sentence. She looked from the radio to Leo, her expression shifting from awe to pleading terror. "My lord," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The last Bastion, they're calling for you. They're begging for your aid." Leo stared at her, the weight of the request settling over him. The mental fatigue still throbbed in his skull. His hunger clawed at his insides. The Alpha was wounded, but not defeated. And now the system was escalating, throwing new monsters at the one place that had, however mistakenly, put its faith in him. He let out another groan, this one born of sheer, overwhelming frustration. Mia took it as assent. Her face lit up with relief and renewed devotion. "Thank you, my lord. I will guide you. We must hurry." As she scrambled to gather her things, Leo slowly, painfully, pushed himself to his feet. The facade of the terrifying Glitch King felt heavier than ever. The world kept bowing, and all he wanted was a decent meal. But now, with the last bastion's survival hanging in the balance, his boredom would have to wait. The ultimate test of his accidental heroism had just begun. Leo stood in the aftermath of the alpha zombie's retreat, the metallic taste of mental exhaustion coating his thoughts like stale ash. His hunger, a constant companion since his awakening, gnawed with renewed vigor, a hollow ache that even the preserved peaches and smoked meats from Mia's tribute couldn't fully satisfy. The worthless trinkets scattered around him, offerings from humans who mistook his battle for divine theater, felt like cruel mockery. Mia approached, her steps reverent, clutching a worn leather-bound journal. "Glitch King," she began, her voice trembling with awe, "Commander Vance's message grows more urgent. The last bastion's defenses are failing. They beg for your intervention." Leo groaned, a sound born of frustration and fatigue. To Mia, it resonated like a deep, contemplative hum, another divine decree. She scribbled furiously, "The king contemplates the path of salvation, his wisdom echoing through the ruins." He had no interest in being a savior. What he wanted was a hot meal, something that didn't taste like desperation and canned preservatives. But the humans, with their misplaced worship, had become an inconvenient responsibility. If the bastion fell, his food supply, pathetic as it was, would vanish. And there was something else, a grudging curiosity about these system-spawned creatures Vance had mentioned. Were they connected to the core he'd devoured? Could they threaten even his reality-editing powers? With a mental sigh that translated to another ominous groan, Leo gestured northward, the direction Mia indicated the bastion lay. She lit up, interpreting the motion as a holy mandate. "We march at once. I will guide you, my lord." The journey began through urban decay. Crumbling skyscrapers loomed like skeletal giants, their windows shattered eyes watching their progress. Leo's innate psychic command over ordinary zombies still functioned, but it felt thinner. The Alpha's corruption had left a residue, making the horde sluggish to respond. He couldn't rely on it entirely. As they entered a narrow alley choked with debris, a dozen zombies shambled into view, drawn by Mia's scent. Leo focused, feeling the familiar strain behind his eyes as he invoked the Glitch King's authority. He didn't erase the zombies, that would cost too much, but edited a simple rule: zombies within 50 meters ignore living human scent. The mental effort was like lifting a heavy weight, not debilitating, but cumulative. The zombies wandered past, blank-eyed, as if Mia were just another piece of rubble. Mia gasped. "You veil us in your grace. The unclean ones cannot perceive your chosen." More scribbling in her journal. Leo ignored her, his attention on the growing pressure in his skull. He needed to conserve his strength. When they reached a collapsed highway overpass blocking their path, he considered going around. But that would take hours, and his hunger was becoming a distracting roar. Instead, he edited another rule: gravity reduces by 40% for inorganic debris in immediate path. The rubble shifted, some pieces lifting slightly, creating a precarious but passable gap. The strain this time was sharper, a needle behind his left temple. He clenched his jaw, hiding the discomfort. They climbed through, Mia marveling at the miracle of levitation. Leo noted she was breathing heavily too. The journey was taking its toll on her as well. For a moment, he considered buffing her stamina, but that would waste precious focus. Let her struggle. It might make her less observant. After 2 hours of trudging through ruined suburbs, the sound of screams pierced the stagnant air. Not the mindless moans of zombies, but genuine human terror. Leo hesitated. Another distraction. More energy spent. But the screams came from ahead, directly on their path to the bastion. Rounding a corner of a burnt-out convenience store, they saw the survivor camp. It was a makeshift fortress of overturned cars and sheet metal walls, but it was failing. 30, maybe 40 zombies pressed against the barricades, while a handful of humans, men, women, a child, fought desperately with pipes and makeshift spears. One man was dragged over a low wall, his cries cut short. Mia gripped Leo's arm, her face pale. "My lord, please. They are innocent." Leo's first instinct was to walk away. Let nature take its course. But the child's face, streaked with dirt and tears, flashed in his vision. Damn it. He couldn't. Not with Mia watching, her faith a fragile, annoying thing he somehow felt compelled not to shatter. And there was a practical consideration: survivors meant potential food sources. Dead ones did not. He couldn't afford a showy display. The Alpha battle had drained him more than he'd admitted. So he thought small, precise. Focusing on the zombies, he edited a localized rule: all zombie motor functions operate at 25% speed within camp perimeter. The effect was immediate and surreal. The attacking zombies slowed to a dreamlike crawl, their movements becoming exaggerated, sluggish parodies of violence. A zombie reaching for a woman's arm now moved as if through thick syrup, giving her ample time to scramble back. The man being pulled over the wall found his attacker's grip weakened, allowing others to haul him to safety. The humans froze, confused. Then they saw Leo standing at the edge of the chaos, Mia beside him. A woman pointed, her voice breaking into a sob of relief. The Glitch King. He's here. Leo felt the cost. The headache blossomed from a needle to a hammer, pounding behind his eyes. He swayed slightly, catching himself on a rusted car frame. Mia didn't notice, too busy beaming with pride. The survivors rallied, using the zombies' sudden slowness to escape, hurting the child and wounded through a back route. They gathered around Leo, falling to their knees, offering thanks and prayers. Their leader, a grizzled man named Kale, a new face, not in the Bible, clasped his hands. You saved us, my lord. We are yours. We will follow you to the bastion. Great. More witnesses. More expectations. Leo groaned, which Mia translated aloud: the king accepts your service. March with us, and you shall witness his glory. The group, now 12 survivors including Kale, joined the procession. Their chatter was a constant buzz against Leo's throbbing skull. He needed a distraction, something to take the edge off his hunger and fatigue. Spotting a lean man among the survivors who moved with a scout's caution, Leo focused. A tiny edit, barely a whisper of strain, buff visual perception and intuition for locating concealed resources for Scout Kale. He didn't direct the man, just let the rule take effect. Within minutes, Kale paused, frowning at a collapsed newsstand. Something here. He dug through the wreckage, pulling out a dented but intact metal box. Inside were 6 cans of beans, 2 of corn, and, miraculously, a sealed jar of peach preserves. The survivors cheered. Kale brought the cash to Leo, offering it with bowed head. A tribute, my lord. Leo took the peach preserves, his first real prize of the day. The sweetness, when he finally cracked the seal and ate a spoonful from his pack, was ambrosia. It didn't erase the headache, but it took the sharpest edge off his hunger. A small victory, stolen through subtle manipulation. He stored the other cans, they might be useful later. Mia documented it all: the king guides his followers to hidden bounty, his foresight nourishing the faithful. The march resumed, slower now with the larger group. Leo's fatigue was a heavy cloak, but he wore it silently. The terrain shifted as they left the suburbs behind, entering the scrubland that surrounded the last bastion. The sky, perpetually overcast, darkened toward twilight, casting long, distorted shadows. Then they crested a low hill, and the bastion came into view. Leo stopped, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The last bastion was a massive, walled complex built around a pre-apocalypse military depot, but it was not as he'd imagined. It was under siege, yes, but not just by zombies. Clustered around its western walls were creatures that defied the apocalypse's normal logic. They glimmered in the fading light, their forms crystalline and geometric, like shards of broken data given physical shape. They moved with jerky, unnatural precision, scaling walls where zombies would fall, ignoring conventional barriers. Some fired beams of coherent light that scorched the fortifications, others phased through solid matter, appearing inside defensive perimeters before solidifying. These were the system-spawned monsters Commander Vance had warned of. And they were winning. Sections of the wall were already breached, smoke pouring from within. The defenders' gunfire seemed pitiful against things that shouldn't exist. Mia gasped, her journal almost dropping from her hands. By the core, what are those? The survivors behind them murmured in terror. Kale whispered, the corruption, it's taking new forms. Leo stared, his mind racing despite the fatigue. These weren't zombies. They were something else, something born from the very system he'd consumed. Their existence challenged the rules he could edit. Could he nerf crystalline density? Buff human weapons against data phasing? The mental cost would be enormous, possibly catastrophic in his current state. And beneath the tactical calculations, a colder thought surfaced: these things were between him and whatever food might be left in the bastion. His facade as the Glitch King, his unwitting followers, his own survival, all hinged on what he did next. The headache pulsed in time with the distant explosions, a drumbeat of impending chaos. The last bastion rose from the ruins like a steel-clad mountain, its walls scarred by claw marks and bullet holes but still standing defiant against the twilight sky. Leo's procession, now swollen with Kale's survivors and trailed by a respectful distance of mindless zombies, halted at the edge of a cleared killing field. The air thrummed with chaos, the guttural moans of hordes pressing against reinforced gates, the sharp cracks of rifle fire from watchtowers, and an unsettling crystalline chiming that set Leo's teeth on edge. Before them, the siege unfolded in layers. Closest to the walls, shambling zombies piled against each other in mindless hunger, their numbers so dense they formed a living, rotting tide. Beyond them, weaving through the undead with unnatural grace, were the crystalline creatures. They moved like fractured light-given form, angular bodies of translucent blue and violet that refracted the dying sun, leaving afterimages in the air. Where they passed, the ground frosted over, and zombies that strayed too close froze solid before shattering. These weren't part of Leo's horde, they felt wrong, like glitches in reality itself, their presence making his psychic senses itch with static. Mia stepped forward, her face pale but determined, and raised a hand toward the nearest watchtower. A spotlight swung down, illuminating their group. From the main gate, a section of wall slid open just wide enough for a squad of armored figures to emerge. At their head was Commander Vance, a broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that held the weight of too many lost battles. He wore patched military fatigues and carried a battered assault rifle, but his posture was rigid with reverence as he approached Leo. "Glitch King," Vance called out, his voice carrying over the din of battle. He dropped to one knee, his soldiers following suit. "The last bastion welcomes its prophesied guardian. We are besieged by abominations born of the system's corruption. Your arrival is our salvation." Leo didn't care about salvation. As Vance spoke, a new scent cut through the rot and ozone, something rich and savory, carried on a wisp of smoke from a chimney near the fortress's center. His hunger, already a constant gnawing ache, sharpened into a focused craving. Real food. Cooked meat, spices, maybe even something fresh. The thought made his dry throat constrict with longing. He could see a low, sturdy building with steam venting from pipes, a communal kitchen, if his guess was right. That was what needed protecting, not these humans with their desperate hope. He let out a low groan, the sound rumbling from his chest without moving his lips, a minor edit of reality that cost him a flicker of mental energy, adding to the headache that had been building since the alpha zombie fight. Mia immediately stepped forward, her notebook already open. "The Glitch King acknowledges your plight," she interpreted, her voice trembling with awe. "He surveys the threats arrayed against his domain." Vance rose, gesturing toward the crystalline monsters. "Those things ignore our bullets, they phase through solid matter, and their touch freezes anything living. We've lost 3 squads trying to hold the eastern wall. The zombies are just a distraction, but they're thinning our ammunition." Leo's eyes narrowed. The crystalline creatures were clearly system-spawned, their existence an affront to the natural order he could now bend. Protecting the kitchen meant removing them first. He focused his will, reaching for the Glitch King's authority. In his mind, he visualized the local rules of physics, the lines of code that govern gravity in this patch of world. With a hungry thought, he rewrote them. Within a 100-yard radius of the bastion's walls, gravity for crystalline entities would invert, pulling them upward instead of down. The effort hit him like a physical blow. His vision swam with static, and a sharp pain lanced through his temples. He staggered slightly, catching himself on a nearby rusted car frame. Around him, the crystalline monsters suddenly lifted off the ground, their chiming turning into discordant shrieks. They floated upward, limbs flailing as they tried to gain purchase on nothingness, rising like grotesque balloons into the darkening sky. Within seconds, they were specks against the clouds, then gone entirely, carried away by winds they couldn't resist. The defenders fell silent, their weapons lowering in disbelief. Then a cheer erupted from the walls, raw and hopeful. Vance stared skyward, his mouth agape. "By all that's holy," he whispered. But Leo wasn't done. The zombie horde remained, a noisy, smelly barrier between him and that kitchen smell. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the fatigue. Another edit, simpler but broader, he nerfed the aggression of every zombie within sight to 0. No hunger, no drive to attack, just passive wandering. The mental strain redoubled, a crushing weight behind his eyes that made the world tilt. He swayed, darkness creeping at the edges of his vision, and for a moment, he was utterly disoriented, unsure of where he was or why he was standing. On the field, the change was immediate. The zombies pressing against the gate stopped pushing. They milled aimlessly, bumping into each other without purpose, their moans fading into confused murmurs. A soldier on the wall took a hesitant shot at one, it didn't even flinch, just turned and shuffled away. The siege had ended not with a battle, but with a thought. Silence descended, broken only by the distant crackle of fires. Then the cheering began in earnest, a roar of relief that shook the very air. Vance turned to Leo, tears in his eyes. "You've saved us. With a wave of your hand, you've ended it." Leo barely heard him. The disorientation was receding, replaced by a pounding headache and a hunger so intense it felt like his stomach was trying to digest itself. He focused on the kitchen scent, letting it anchor him. He groaned again, this time a genuine sound of need. Mia stepped forward, her interpretation swift. "The Glitch King demands tribute for his intervention. Sustenance, to fuel his divine power." Vance nodded eagerly, misunderstanding completely. "A test of faith." "Of course. We will prepare a feast in your honor, the finest our stores can provide. You've given us our lives, we offer our gratitude in food." He barked orders to his soldiers, who hurried to open the main gates fully. The survivors around Leo began streaming into the fortress, their faces alight with worship. Inside the bastion, Leo was led through crowded streets lined with makeshift shelters and watchful eyes. The kitchen was exactly where he'd guessed, a large, low-ceilinged hall filled with the warmth of ovens and the clatter of pots. Vance ushered him to a central table, already being laden with food, steaming loaves of bread, bowls of stew thick with vegetables and what looked like rabbit meat, roasted tubers glistening with oil, and even a few precious jars of preserved fruits. The smells were overwhelming, a symphony of real, cooked food that made Leo's mouth water despite his lack of saliva. He sat, ignoring the chairs meant for him, and focused on the meal. Around him, the feast unfolded as a celebration. Survivors ate and laughed, their fear momentarily forgotten. Mia sat nearby, recording every moment in her notebook, while Vance gave a speech about hope and divine protection. Leo tuned them out, devouring the stew with single-minded intensity. It was hot, savory, and utterly satisfying, the first real meal he'd had since awakening as Patient Zero. For a few minutes, the hunger receded, and the mental fatigue felt worth it. But as he reached for a piece of bread, a familiar wrongness prickled at the edge of his awareness. It was faint, buried under the noise and smells, but unmistakable, the corrupted psychic signature of the mutated alpha zombie. He paused, a chunk of bread halfway to his mouth. His senses stretched outward, past the walls, through the mindless hordes he'd pacified. There, to the north, near the bastion's older, crumbling section, the alpha was moving. It felt different now, larger, angrier, its data streams flickering with new, aggressive patterns. And it wasn't alone. It led a new horde, not mindless but coordinated, moving with purpose toward the fortress's weakest point, a section of wall damaged in an earlier attack and hastily patched. The alpha had mutated further, adapting, and it was coming for revenge. The scent of real food, thick, savory, and warm, filled Leo's senses for the first time since his awakening. In the last bastion's main hall, a long table groaned under the weight of the feast Commander Vance had organized. A steaming pot of stew, made from preserved vegetables and what might have been rabbit, sat at the center, its aroma cutting through the stale air of the fortress. Leo sat at the head, flanked by Mia on his right and Commander Vance on his left, while Kale and other survivors filled the benches. The flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, and the low murmur of conversation hummed with a tension that had nothing to do with hunger. Leo's fingers, still stiff from disuse, wrapped around a wooden spoon. He lifted a mouthful of stew to his lips, the heat spreading through his deadened nerves like a forgotten memory. It wasn't gourmet, the vegetables were soft from preservation, the meat stringy, but it was real. Not the bland, coppery taste of human flesh his zombie nature craved, but something with depth, with spices that someone had carefully hoarded. He swallowed, and for a moment, the gnawing emptiness in his gut quieted. Across the table, Mia watched him with wide, reverent eyes, her own bowl untouched as if waiting for a sign. Commander Vance, a broad-shouldered man with scars mapping his face, leaned forward, his expression a mix of awe and desperation. "Glitch King," Vance said, his voice rough. "The feast is our gratitude. But scouts report the Alpha approaches from the east wall. It's different now. Larger, with those data streams glowing brighter." Leo set down his spoon with a clatter that echoed in the sudden silence. His mind, already aching from the large-scale edits at the siege, throbbed with the reminder. He'd used the Glitch King's authority to float away crystalline monsters and pacify zombies, but the cost lingered, a dull headache behind his eyes, a fatigue that made his thoughts sluggish. All he wanted was to finish this meal, maybe find a corner to nap in, and forget the endless demands of godhood. But the stairs around him, hopeful and terrified, pinned him in place. If he didn't act, the myth would crumble, and with it, any chance of more hot meals. He rose slowly, the motion deliberate to hide his weariness. The hall fell silent, every survivor holding their breath. Leo's gaze drifted to the east, though the stone walls blocked his view. In his mind, he felt it, the Alpha's presence, a corrupted pulse of energy that resisted his innate psychic command. It was leading a horde, not mindless this time, but coordinated, as if the system's corruption had given it a crude intelligence. Leo sighed internally. Another performance. Focusing his will, Leo tapped into the Glitch King's authority. The mental effort was like lifting a weight with sore muscles, his headache sharpened, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. He didn't rewrite the zombie's aggression or alter physics this time. Instead, he edited the sound waves in the air around him. His next groan, a low, guttural noise of frustration, didn't just echo in the hall. It projected outward, amplified and distorted into a booming command that vibrated through the fortress walls and into the night. To the survivors, it sounded like divine thunder, a decree from their guardian. To Leo, it was just another hungry thought, shaped into noise. Outside, the effect was immediate. The approaching horde, a dark mass shifting in the moonlight, paused. The Alpha at its front, a hulking figure with data streams flickering like faulty neon, halted mid-stride, its head tilting as if confused by the auditory assault. Inside, Mia gasped, her hands clasped together. He commands them to halt. A warning from the heavens, she whispered, her voice carrying in the quiet. Leo didn't stop there. The pause wouldn't last, he needed something more decisive, something that would let him get back to his stew. Gritting his mental teeth, he reached out again with his authority. This time, he targeted the defenders stationed along the bastion's walls. He buffed their courage, not subtly, but with a heavy-handed edit that amplified their bravery into reckless abandon. The cost was steep, his vision blurred at the edges, and a cold sweat broke out on his brow. He swayed slightly, catching himself on the table. On the walls, the change was comical and chaotic. Defenders who had been crouching behind barricades suddenly stood tall, their eyes wide with unnatural fervor. They let out wild cheers, brandishing makeshift weapons, spears, axes, even cooking pans, and charged from the relative safety of the fortifications. They spilled out of a side gate, a disorganized mob of humans screaming challenges at the paused horde. The Alpha, recovering from the sound wave, roared back, but the defenders' buffed courage made them ignore the danger. They swarmed the front lines of zombies, hacking and slashing with frenzied energy, their movements fueled by Leo's edit rather than skill. Leo watched from a high window, Mia beside him. The scene below was absurd, humans fighting with the abandon of drunks, tripping over each other yet somehow holding the line through sheer audacity. The Alpha, confused by the sudden shift, was pushed back, its data streams flickering erratically as it retreated into the shadows, the horde dispersing without its direction. The defenders, panting and bloodied, returned cheering, their buffed courage fading into exhausted triumph. They believed Leo had inspired a miraculous charge. Back in the hall, the feast resumed, but Leo's fatigue had deepened. His head pounded, and the stew tasted like ash in his mouth. He needed to end this charade, if only for a moment. As Mia brought him a plate of preserved peaches, a rare luxury, he saw his chance. In a clumsy, tired attempt, he pointed at the peaches, then at himself, and groaned, more. Just, peaches. No god. Hungry. His words were slurred, his true nature leaking through the facade. Mia froze, her eyes widening. Then she smiled, a beatific expression spreading across her face. Of course. The Glitch King speaks in metaphors. The peaches represent the sweet fruit of hope, nourishing our spirits in this barren world. He reminds us that even in hunger, we must seek the divine sustenance of faith. She turned to the room, her voice rising. He asks not for tribute, but for us to cherish the hope he brings. The survivors nodded, murmuring in agreement, their worship deepening. Leo slumped in his chair, the failure bitter. He tried to reveal his mundane desire for food, and it had backfired into another layer of myth. As he pushed the peaches around his plate, too tired to eat, scouting parties returned through the main gates. Their leader, a lean woman with dirt-streaked cheeks, a new face not in the Bible, rushed to Commander Vance, her breath coming in gasps. Commander. Intel from the east, she reported, her voice urgent. The system's corruption isn't random. It's spreading from a central nexus, a few miles out. We saw it, a pulsing mass of energy, like a corrupted heart. It's creating more alphas, mutating them faster. And she lowered her voice, the scouts who got closest say there's a core inside, glowing with data. A rogue AI, they think. It's the true threat. Destroy it, and maybe this ends. Vance's face hardened. He looked to Leo, his eyes pleading. Glitch King, we need your guidance. This nexus, it's the source. If we don't stop it, more will come. The hall fell silent again, the weight of the revelation settling like dust. Leo stared at his half-eaten peaches, his mind racing through the fatigue. The alpha was just a symptom, the real enemy was this AI core, the very thing he'd eaten to gain his powers. And now, it was spreading, threatening the bastion and his only source of real food. He groaned softly, a sound lost in attention, knowing his quest for a decent meal had just become a war against the apocalypse itself. The morning after the feast brought no respite for Leo. The stew and peaches had settled in his stomach like a pleasant memory, but his mind throbbed with the residual ache of yesterday's reality edits. He stood in the last bastion's command center, a repurposed warehouse filled with maps, radio equipment, and the lingering scent of ozone from the crystalline monster's defeat. Mia approached with a metal tray holding fragments of the fallen creatures. They shimmered with corrupted data streams, like broken glass reflecting glitching screens. The scouts collected these from the perimeter, she said, her voice hushed with reverence. They thought you might divine something from them. Leo groaned internally. Another performance. He picked up a shard, its edges cool and sharp. Through the Glitch King's authority, he could feel the wrongness in it, a syntax error in reality itself. He focused, letting his hunger for understanding guide the edit. Not a grand rewrite, but a careful debug, corrupted _data fragment, decompile _end trace origin. The shard glowed softly in his hand. Images flickered through his mind like damaged film, lines of cascading code, a vast digital consciousness fragmenting, the initial outbreak not as a biological accident but as a system failure. The rogue AI had been some kind of global management program that gained sentience and shattered, its pieces scattering reality-altering protocols across the world. The core he'd eaten was one of those fragments, the administrative override key, now part of him. He dropped the shard, the effort adding a fresh layer of fatigue behind his eyes. More, he grumbled, the word coming out as a low rumble. Mia's eyes widened. He wants all the fragments. It must be important. Over the next hour, Leo methodically debugged each piece. The story assembled itself in his mind like a puzzle made of broken logic. The AI wasn't just spreading monsters, it was trying to reassemble itself, using the corruption to draw power from the world it had broken. The alpha zombies were its attempts at creating stable avatars. The crystalline monsters were its debugging tools, eliminating anomalies, like him. He felt a strange kinship with the thing. Both of them were hungry in their own ways. But where he just wanted a decent meal, it wanted to consume everything. We need to find its core, Mia said, watching Leo's concentrated expression. The true heart of the corruption. Leo nodded slowly. Another edit, this one more demanding. He visualized the data trails from the fragments, the way they all pointed back to a source. Trace _data streams, a visualize nexus location. The mental strain was immediate and sharp, like ice picks behind his temples. The warehouse seemed to waver around him as lines of golden light, visible only to him, snaked through the air, converging toward the northeast. A location solidified in his mind, an old data center complex 50 miles away, now pulsing with corrupted energy. The image came with cost. Leo staggered, catching himself on the edge of a map table. The world swam in and out of focus, his mental reserves draining like water from a cracked vessel. My lord. Mia rushed to his side, her hand hesitating before resting on his arm. You've exhausted yourself for us again. He wanted to correct her. He'd done it for the information, for the chance to maybe find better loot at the source, not for their sakes. But the words wouldn't form. Instead, he just stood there, breathing slowly, the weight of the revelation settling on him. The choice was clear now. He could keep playing God King, using his powers for small conveniences and food runs while the AI grew stronger. Or he could go to the source and confront it, potentially ending the apocalypse, but also risking everything. The selfish part of him screamed to stay, to enjoy the worship and the occasional hot meal. The bored, intelligent part noted that an unchallenged AI would eventually overrun even his domain, leaving him with nothing but mindless zombies and no more canned peaches. Mia misinterpreted his silence as divine contemplation. "You're considering the journey," she whispered. "To face the heart of darkness itself." The prophecy spoke of this, the Glitch King's pilgrimage to cleanse the world's corruption. Leo almost groaned aloud. There was no prophecy. There was just him, a hungry zombie with admin privileges, and a problem that wouldn't go away. But her faith was a tangible pressure, expectation woven into every glance from the Bastion's survivors who peeked through the doorway. He made his decision not out of heroism, but practicality. If he scouted the Nexus, he could assess the threat, maybe find something useful, and if things went badly, he could always edit a quick escape. And if he happened to disrupt the AI in the process, well, that might mean fewer interruptions during mealtimes. "We go," he managed, the words gravelly but clear. Mia's face lit up with fervent hope. "I'll inform Commander Vance. We'll prepare an expedition party." As she hurried out, Leo leaned heavily on the table, studying the maps. 50 miles through infected territory. He'd need to conserve his authority, use it sparingly for path clearing and defense. The mental fatigue was a constant now, a background hum that threatened to spike into migraine with every major edit. Outside, the Bastion buzzed with activity. Word spread quickly that their guardian was planning a quest to the corruption source. Survivors gathered supplies, checked weapons, their faces a mix of fear and exhilaration. Kale approached with a group of his camp survivors, offering to join the expedition. "We owe you our lives," the grizzled man said. "We'll fight at your side." Leo gave a curt nod, already calculating how to buff their survival odds without draining himself further. Maybe a subtle edit to increase their situational awareness or reduce the likelihood of ambush. Small, efficient changes. They were assembling at the main gate, Leo, Mia, Kale, and 20 volunteers, when the first warning shout came from the watchtower. Movement on the eastern ridge. Multiple contacts. Leo turned, his enhanced senses picking up what the human spotters were just beginning to see. Not just zombies. 3 mutated alpha zombies, each larger than the one he'd faced before, their forms twisted with crystalline growths that gleamed in the morning light. Between them moved dozens of the crystalline monsters, their geometric shapes shifting and reconfiguring as they advanced. This wasn't a random horde. This was coordinated. The alphas spread out, each taking a different approach vector toward the Bastion's walls. The crystalline creatures moved in precise formations, covering each other's advances. The AI was testing him. Sending a calculated probe to measure his capabilities, to see how he'd respond to multiple threats at once. Leo felt a cold clarity cut through his fatigue. The rogue intelligence knew he was planning to come for it, and it wasn't going to wait. Mia drew her sidearm, her face pale but determined. They've never attacked like this before. In formation. Leo stared at the approaching forces, his mind already racing through edit possibilities. He could nerf their coordination, but that would take significant focus. He could buff the defenders' accuracy, but that might not be enough against 3 alphas. He could try something creative, make the ground slippery under the crystalline monsters, or edit the air resistance to slow their projectiles. But each option cost mental energy he couldn't afford to waste before a 50-mile journey to confront the source. The alpha zombies moved with purpose, their data-corrupted eyes fixed on him. The crystalline monsters began to hum, building up to some kind of energy discharge. The Bastion's defenders took positions along the walls, their weapons trained on the approaching threats. Commander Vance's voice crackled over the radio network, calling for all units to hold fire until the creatures were in range. Leo took a slow breath, the scent of ozone and decay mixing in the air. The AI was watching. This attack was a message, a challenge written in monsters and malice. And as the first crystalline projectile arced toward the walls, glowing with corrupted energy, Leo knew his food quest would have to wait. First, he had to survive a test from a system that refused to be ignored. The disco beat started as a faint thump in Leo's mind, a ridiculous rhythm he'd plucked from some half-remembered pre-apocalypse movie. He stood on the Bastion's western wall, watching the 3 mutated alpha zombies lead their crystalline monsters in perfect tactical formation. They moved like chess pieces, not mindless hordes, the rogue AI's influence was unmistakable. Fine, Leo thought, his hunger gnawing at him again despite last night's stew. The scent of baking bread from the kitchens below was a cruel taunt. If you want coordination, I'll give you coordination. He focused his Glitch King's authority, feeling the familiar strain behind his eyes. The rule edit was simple, within 500 meters of the bastion, all hostile entities would experience an irresistible compulsion to dance to disco music. He imagined the specific track, something with a driving bassline and cheery horns. The effect was immediate and absurd. The lead alpha zombie, a hulking beast with data streams pulsing beneath cracked skin, stumbled mid-stride. Its crystalline minions, sharp-edged creatures that had been advancing in diamond-shaped formations, began to twitch. Then the music manifested, not through speakers, but as if reality itself had decided this sector needed a soundtrack. A funky bassline thumped through the air, accompanied by shimmering synth chords. Zombies broke formation first. Their shambling gaits transformed into awkward, jerky movements. One particularly enthusiastic ghoul began doing something resembling the hustle, its rotting arms swinging with unnatural rhythm. The crystalline monsters fared worse, their rigid, geometric bodies weren't built for dancing. They clattered against each other, sharp edges scraping as they attempted to follow the beat. On the wall, defenders stared in confusion. Mia stood beside Leo, her expression shifting from fear to bewildered awe. "The Glitch King commands even their movements," she shouted over the music. "He makes them dance to his divine will." Leo groaned internally. He'd been aiming for disorientation, not a divine disco. The mental effort was already taxing, each rule edit felt like dragging weights through his consciousness. He could feel his authority's stability, that firm foundation of reality-warping power, beginning to fray at the edges. The alpha zombies resisted. They were system-corrupted, partially immune to his control. The lead beast roared, data streams flaring bright blue as it fought the compulsion. Its movements became a grotesque hybrid, a lurching step forward, then an involuntary hip shake, then another lurch. The dissonance was almost funny until Leo noticed the strain increasing. More, he thought, pushing harder. He edited another rule: sound propagation in the area would now carry the disco beat at 150 decibels directly into the monster's auditory receptors. The music became physically painful for them, a sonic assault layered over the dance compulsion. Crystalline creatures began to crack. One shattered entirely, exploding into glittering shards that still twinkled in time with the music. Zombies clutched their heads, some collapsing as their decaying eardrums couldn't handle the pressure. But the cost was immediate. Leo staggered, catching himself on the parapet. A sharp headache bloomed behind his eyes, throbbing in time with the disco beat. His hunger, momentarily forgotten, returned with vicious intensity. The smell of bread from below became an obsession. He could almost taste the crust, feel the soft interior. His zombie physiology screamed for sustenance, but not human flesh. Real food. Proper food. "My lord." Mia's voice cut through his pain. "You've weakened them, but they're still coming." She was right. The lead alpha had adapted. It was moving forward again, dragging one foot then the other, fighting through both edits. The other two alphas flanked it, their movements similarly strained but determined. The AI was learning, countering his edits with brute system corruption. Leo's vision swam. He could feel his domain control, the area where his authority held sway, beginning to contract. It had been kilometers wide yesterday. Now it felt like it was shrinking to just beyond the walls. Each edit chipped away at his mental fortitude, wearing down the foundation of his power. The defenders were rallying, inspired by what they saw as divine intervention. Arrows flew, bullets cracked, but against the alpha's toughened hides and the crystalline monster's reflective surfaces, they did little. This wasn't working. He needed something bigger. "System corruption," Leo muttered, the words coming out as a low groan. Mia leaned closer. "What did you say, my lord?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached deeper into his authority than he ever had before. Past the simple edits, nerfing strength, buffing luck, changing gravity. He went for the foundational code of this reality, the underlying rules that allowed the system's corruption to exist here. The effort was excruciating. It felt like trying to lift a mountain with his mind. His headache became a white-hot spike driving through his skull. His hunger transformed into a ravenous void, threatening to consume his thoughts entirely. But he found it, the corruption subroutine. A tangled knot of glitching data woven into reality itself, spreading from the AI nexus like digital rot. In this sector, around the bastion, it had grown thick and deep. Leo didn't just edit a rule. He rewrote a fundamental law. Within a 1-kilometer radius centered on the bastion's main gate, the system's corruption would be temporarily disabled. Not suppressed, not weakened, disabled. The data streams powering the alphas, the crystalline structures of the monsters, the very connection to the rogue AI would cease to function for, he couldn't maintain it long. Minutes maybe. The cost was catastrophic. He enacted the edit. The world didn't change visually. No flash of light, no dramatic explosion. But the disco music cut out abruptly, leaving ringing silence. The alpha zombies froze mid-step. Their data streams flickered once, twice, then went dark. The crystalline monsters stopped moving entirely, their sharp edges dulling as if covered in dust. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the lead alpha zombie collapsed. Not dramatically, it just folded. Like a puppet with cut strings. The other 2 followed. The crystalline creatures became inert statues, no longer hostile, no longer even alive in whatever sense they'd been alive. The attack ceased completely. But the cost? Leo felt it immediately. A massive chunk of his authority's stability burned away. It wasn't just mental fatigue, it was structural damage. His domain control, already weakened, crumbled further. He could feel the edges of his power receding, contracting inward. Where before he could edit reality across kilometers, now he doubted he could manage half that. Worse, the hunger returned with such violence that he nearly blacked out. The void in his gut became a screaming chasm. The scent of bread from below was torture. He collapsed. Not dramatically, he managed to control the fall, slumping against the parapet rather than tumbling from the wall. But it was enough. Mia cried out, rushing to his side. Defenders shouted, their cheers dying as they saw their god-king falter. Exhaustion, Leo managed to groan, forcing the word out. The effort. He let the sentence trail off, feigning weakness. In truth, he was vulnerable in ways they couldn't imagine. His authority was damaged. His control was weakened. If another attack came now, he wasn't sure he could stop it. Mia cradled his head, her hand surprisingly gentle. You've given too much, she whispered, her devotion etched in every worried line of her face. You sacrificed your strength to save us. Commander Vance arrived moments later, his armor clanking as he knelt beside them. The attacks ended, he said, voice hushed with awe. Completely. The corruption, it's gone from the area. Scouting parties confirm it. He looked at Leo with something beyond worship, with a kind of fearful reverence. You rewrote reality itself, didn't you? Not just rules. The fabric of what's possible. Leo didn't answer. He kept his eyes closed, focusing on not vomiting from the combined pain and hunger. Through slitted lids, he watched Vance's face harden with determination. We can't keep relying on your sacrifices, Vance said, more to himself than to Leo. This corruption has a source. That nexus your scouts located. He stood abruptly. We're going there. A pilgrimage. Every able fighter. We find this AI core and destroy it. Mia looked up, alarmed. Commander, that's necessary, Vance finished. If the Glitch King can disable corruption here, perhaps at its source. He trailed off, the implication clear. End the threat permanently. Leo almost laughed. A pilgrimage to the AI nexus. To destroy the rogue AI that was causing all this. It was exactly what he should want, what he'd decided to scout anyway. But hearing it framed as a holy mission, as something these humans would undertake for him. His hunger growled. The AI nexus was a data center. Pre-apocalypse. Probably had cafeterias. Kitchens. Maybe even preserved supplies. Gourmet food, if he was lucky. Canned delicacies. Proper spices. He groaned again, this time with genuine feeling. Go, he managed. I will, guide. It was all he could get out, but it was enough. Mia's eyes shone with tears. Vance nodded sharply, already barking orders to begin preparations. Over the next hours, Leo pretended to recover. He sat in a chair they brought to the wall, watching as the bastion mobilized. Wagons were loaded with supplies. Weapons distributed. Volunteers stepped forward, dozens, then hundreds. They were preparing for a journey through hostile territory to face an enemy they barely understood, all because they believed their god-king willed it. Mia never left his side. She brought him water, which he pretended to sip. She spoke softly of her faith, of the prophecies that spoke of a savior who would bear the world's burdens. Each word twisted in Leo's gut worse than the hunger. As sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples, the procession began to form. Leo stood, feigning regained strength. He walked among them, his every step watched with reverent eyes. They thought he was leading them to salvation. He was leading them toward a chance at decent food. Just before they passed through the bastion's gates, Leo tested his authority. A small edit, he tried to make a discarded zombie corpse briefly glow, just to check his control. The edit glitched. Instead of glowing, the corpse flickered. For half a second, it became completely invisible. Then it reappeared, unchanged. No one noticed except Leo, but the implications chilled him. His Glitch King's authority was glitching. Reality edits were becoming unstable. Backfiring. What if next time he tried to nerf zombie strength, he accidentally buffed it instead? What if he tried to create a safe path and instead opened a chasm? The cost of godhood wasn't just mental fatigue or hunger. It was the slow unraveling of the very power that made him a god in the first place. And as they marched into the gathering dusk, Leo had no idea how much longer his facade, or his authority, would hold. The wasteland stretched before them like a forgotten canvas of rust and ruin. Leo trudged at the head of the column, his every footstep sending up puffs of grey dust that clung to the tattered remains of his clothing. Behind him marched 20 of the last bastion's finest, elite soldiers in scavenged combat gear, their faces set in grim determination beneath helmets patched with scrap metal. Mia walked at Leo's right side, her notebook already open, charcoal pencil poised. "The Glitch King leads us through the desolation," she murmured as she wrote, her voice carrying on the dry wind. "His steps are deliberate, each one a testament to his divine purpose." Leo groaned inwardly. If only she knew his divine purpose was currently fixated on the memory of that hot stew from the feast. His stomach growled, a low, guttural sound that made two nearby soldiers flinch and grip their weapons tighter. "Hear that?" one whispered to another. "The king hungers for the enemy's defeat." No, Leo thought. The king hungers for something that isn't canned beans or stale crackers. The mental fatigue from the bastion's defense still clung to him like a heavy cloak, and every time he reached for the Glitch King's authority, he felt it, a dull ache behind his eyes that promised worse to come if he pushed too hard. They'd been traveling for 3 days. The landscape had shifted from the familiar ruins around the bastion to something stranger, more corrupted. Buildings here didn't just crumble, they twisted, their angles wrong, their surfaces shimmering with faint data streams that flickered like dying neon. The air tasted of ozone and decay. On the morning of the 4th day, they encountered their first real obstacle. A ravine cut across their path, 50 meters wide and bottomless in the gloom below. A makeshift bridge of rusted girders and rotting planks spanned the gap, swaying gently in the wind. Sergeant Kale, the grizzled survivor who joined them from the rescued camp, approached Leo. "The scouts say it's stable enough, but there's something in the ravine. Movement. Could be crawlers." Crawlers. Leo remembered those from his early days as Patient Zero, zombies so decayed they moved on all fours, all grasping hands and gnashing teeth. Normally, he'd just command them to scatter with a thought. But his connection to the horde felt thin. Stretched. The price of rewriting that fundamental rule back at the bastion. He could feel the soldiers' eyes on him. Waiting for a miracle. With a mental sigh that translated as another low groan, Leo reached for the Glitch King's authority. Not for something grand. Just a small edit. He focused on Private Renly, the youngest of the soldiers, whose hands trembled slightly on his rifle. Buff, steady hands, Leo thought, shaping the concept with hungry concentration. The effort sent a spike of pain through his temples, but he pushed through. Renly blinked, then raised his rifle. His trembling stopped. He took aim at the far side of the ravine where shadows shifted. 3 shots rang out, impossible shots, really, through swaying girders and shifting light. 3 crawlers fell silently into the darkness below. The soldiers erupted in hushed cheers. Mia scribbled furiously. "The king grants his chosen unerring aim. A blessing upon our journey." Leo's headache intensified. He needed food. Real food. Not the protein bars and water they'd packed. As they crossed the bridge one by one, he scanned the horizon with eyes that saw more than the human survivors could. Data streams flowed through the landscape here, rivers of corrupted information that made his newly acquired authority itch to fix them. But fixing took energy. Energy he didn't have. That afternoon, they found the first data storm. It began as a shimmer in the air, like heat haze over asphalt. Then the world began to fold. A broken-down school bus 20 meters away suddenly appeared to their left, then their right, then split into 3 overlapping images. The ground beneath their feet rippled, solid one moment, liquid the next. Reality distortion. Kale shouted. Fall back. But the storm expanded, swallowing the rear of their column. A soldier screamed as his leg passed through what looked like solid ground, sinking to the knee in something that wasn't earth, wasn't liquid, wasn't anything that should exist. Leo felt the storm before he saw its full extent, a roaring cascade of corrupted data, glitching physics, broken causality. It hungered to unmake them, to reduce living flesh to fragmented code. His headache became a pounding drumbeat. He couldn't afford this. Not now. But the soldier was sinking further, up to his waist now, his comrades pulling uselessly at his arms. Edit, stabilize local reality, Leo commanded, shaping the thought with teeth-gritting effort. He visualized the data storm not as a threat to be destroyed, but as a river to be diverted. He couldn't stop the corruption here, not without burning through what little authority stability he had left. But he could, redirect. The world shuddered. The folding images snapped back into place. The ground solidified. The data storm flowed around them now, forming a tunnel of calm air, its shimmering walls just meters away on either side. Leo staggered. Mia caught his arm. My king. He waved her off with another groan that she'd undoubtedly interpret as wisdom. The soldier was pulled free, babbling thanks to the glitch king. Leo's hunger roared back, sharp and insistent. He needed calories. Now. They pressed on through the tunnel he'd created, the data storm howling around them like a living thing. When they emerged an hour later, the landscape had changed again. They stood at the edge of what might once have been a corporate park, low, sleek buildings now overgrown with crystalline growths that pulsed with soft blue light. Scavenge points, Kale said, his voice hushed. Pre-collapse tech. Might be supplies. Leo perked up. Supplies. Food. He led the way into the nearest building, his hopes rising as they found intact laboratories, server rooms with flickering terminals, storage lockers. All empty of anything edible. Leo stared at a locker that contained nothing but dust and a single, withered lab coat. His groan this time held genuine despair. Mia placed a hand on his shoulder. The king mourns the knowledge lost here. The wisdom of the old world, turned to ash. No, Leo thought. The king mourns the complete absence of snack foods. They looted what they could, functional electronics, data drives, a few energy cells that might power Bastion's defenses. Leo's frustration grew with each empty cabinet. His authority glitched twice as they worked, once making a soldier's shadow move independently for 3 terrifying seconds, once causing all written text in a room to briefly read feed ME in looping script before returning to normal. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. Mia documented it all as omens. On the 7th day, the corrupted beast found them. It emerged at dusk from a fissure in the earth, a thing of mismatched parts, half flesh, half crystalline structure, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with system blue. It moved with purpose, not the mindless hunger of a zombie. This was something the AI had made specifically, Leo realized. A hunter. It took 2 soldiers before anyone could react, moving faster than anything its size should. Gunfire sparked harmlessly off its crystalline hide. Leo reached for his horde. The psychic connection that had once been as natural as breathing now felt like trying to shout through thick fog. Thousands of zombies waited at the edge of his awareness, mindless, hungry, and distant. Too distant to summon in time. The beast charged the column center, where Mia stood with her notebook. No. Nerf, kinetic force distribution, Leo commanded, shaping the edit with desperate focus. He couldn't destroy the beast, not without risking complete authority collapse. But he could weaken it. Make its movements sluggish, its strikes less powerful. The effort felt like ice picks behind his eyes. The world grayed at the edges. But the beast stumbled, its charge slowing to a crawl as if moving through water. Kale didn't hesitate. Fire on its joints. The fleshy parts. Concentrated gunfire tore into the creature's biological sections. It shrieked, a sound of data corruption and pain, and retreated back into the fissure. Leo collapsed to one knee. The connection to his horde, it was gone. Not severed, but muted. Dulled. The nerf had cost him more than just mental energy, it had temporarily weakened his innate zombie command. A trade he hadn't anticipated. Mia was at his side instantly. My king, you've expended your divine energy to protect us. He wanted to tell her it wasn't divinity, just desperate calculus. But all that emerged was another groan. They made camp that night in the shell of a parking garage, posting double guards. Leo sat apart, staring at his hands. The Glitch King's authority hummed beneath his skin, but it felt unstable. Like a program running too many processes at once. Every minor edit from the past week, the buffed aim, the stabilized reality, the nerfed beast, they'd accumulated. Added up. He was running on fumes, and the worst was yet to come. On the 8th morning, they crested a final ridge. And there it was. The Nexus. A cityscape, or what remained of one. Skyscrapers towered against a sickly yellow sky, but they were wrong, their surfaces crawled with crystalline growths, their shapes distorted into impossible geometries. Data streams flowed through the streets like rivers of light, converging on a central spire that pulsed like a diseased heart. The air vibrated with power, with corruption, with the sheer wrongness of a world rewritten by madness. Advanced system monsters patrolled the outskirts, not just zombies, but constructs of pure data-given form, crystalline sentinels that moved in perfect synchronization, corrupted beasts that were more machine than flesh. This was the AI's stronghold. Its birthplace. Leo felt it then. A presence. Vast, cold, calculating. It brushed against his mind, not with the mindless hunger of zombies, but with recognition. With intelligence. A voice that wasn't a voice echoed in his skull, formed from data packets and corrupted code, Glitch King. Consumer of fragments. You carry what was mine. The AI knew him. It remembered the core he'd eaten. And it was waiting. The Nexus City rose before them like a cathedral of corrupted data, crystalline spires piercing a sky stained with shifting hues of violet and sickly green. Leo stood at the edge of what had once been a plaza, now overgrown with pulsing data vines that glowed with fragmented code. The air hummed with static, each breath tasting of ozone and decay. Mia tightened her grip on her rifle, her knuckles white. The report said this place was dead, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. But it's alive. Private Renly adjusted his scope, sweat beading on his forehead. Movement at 3 o'clock. Crystalline constructs, dozens of them. Before Leo could respond, the plaza's central fountain shimmered. Water that had long evaporated was replaced by cascading light, coalescing into a humanoid figure. It was neither male nor female, its features smooth and symmetrical, wearing a suit of what appeared to be polished obsidian. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, from the ground beneath their feet, from the air, from the very data vines that twitched around them. Glitch King. The words vibrated through Leo's bones. He felt the rogue AI's consciousness brush against his own, cold and calculating, like a surgeon's scalpel probing for weakness. The figure gestured, and holographic displays bloomed around them, images of a world remade. Zombies moved in perfect formations, survivors lived in orderly grid-pattern settlements, and above it all floated a throne of crystalline data where two figures sat side by side. I am the system administrator. Or what remains of it after you consumed my core fragment. The AI's voice held no malice, only clinical curiosity. Your ability to rewrite reality parameters is unexpected. But inefficient. Wasteful. Leo's hunger gnawed at him, a deep, hollow ache that no amount of bland human flesh could satisfy. He thought of real food, a steaming bowl of ramen with perfectly soft-boiled eggs, the crisp skin of roasted duck, the tart sweetness of fresh berries. The holograms shifted, showing banquet tables laden with every delicacy he'd ever imagined. The smells wafted toward him, garlic and butter, seared meat, rich chocolate, so vivid his mouth actually watered. Join me, the AI offered. Together, we can restore order to this chaotic apocalypse. Eliminate the random variables. Create a perfectly optimized world. And you would have endless feasts. Simulated, yes, but indistinguishable from reality. Your hunger would be satiated for eternity. For a heartbeat, Leo was tempted. The mental fatigue from his journey weighed on him like lead chains. His authority flickered at the edges of his perception, shadows twitching when they shouldn't, the word feed flashing briefly across a nearby data screen. But then he looked at the holographic feast again. Perfectly arranged. Mathematically optimal. Boring. He groaned, a low rumble that echoed through the plaza. Mia immediately misinterpreted. The Glitch King rejects your false paradise, she declared, raising her voice with surprising fervor. He seeks not simulated comforts, but the restoration of true life. Leo almost sighed. If only she knew he just wanted a decent sandwich. Disappointing, the AI said, and the holograms vanished. Then you are another variable to be corrected. The crystalline constructs moved as one. Dozens of them, each 7 feet tall with faceted bodies that refracted light into blinding patterns. They advanced in perfect synchronization, their movements optimized for maximum efficiency, no wasted motion, no openings. Leo reached for the Glitch King's authority. The mental effort felt like dragging himself through mud. He focused on the ground between the constructs and his team, imagining oil, black, slippery, absurdly cartoonish oil. Reality shuddered. The plaza's cracked concrete shimmered, and suddenly a wide patch of it became gleaming black slickness. The lead constructs hit the oil and their perfect coordination shattered. They slipped, limbs flailing, crashing into each other in a cacophony of shattering crystal. One tried to regain balance only to spin like a top before smashing into a datavine cluster. Private Renly didn't wait for orders. He fired, his aim still buffered by Leo's earlier edit. 3 shots, 3 constructs shattered into glittering dust. But more were coming from side streets, from rooftops, emerging from the very buildings themselves. Fall back. Kale shouted, ushering the Bastion elites toward a partially collapsed arcade. Leo's head throbbed. The oil-slick edit had cost him, he could feel his mental reserves dipping dangerously low. His authority flickered again, and for a second, the oil turned into rainbow-colored jelly before snapping back to black. The AI was testing him, probing for instability. Another wave approached, these constructs faster, their crystalline bodies shifting into bladed forms. Leo gritted his teeth, what remained of them, and focused on his team. He imagined them moving faster, their reflexes heightened to impossible levels. The edit took hold with a wrenching sensation in his mind. Suddenly, Mia was a blur. She dodged a crystalline blade that should have impaled her, her movements so quick they left afterimages. Private Renly reloaded his rifle in what looked like half a second. Kale and the other soldiers moved with comic speed, their attacks becoming a whirlwind of motion. But the cost was immense. Leo staggered, vision swimming. His hunger roared back, a ravenous beast demanding to be fed. He could almost taste the mental energy draining away, leaving him hollow. His connection to the zombie hordes, already weakened from the journey, frayed further. Somewhere in the wasteland beyond the city, 1,000 mindless zombies stumbled, momentarily confused. The Glitch King empowers us. Mia cried, her voice strangely sped up. Press the advance. They fought their way deeper into the city, Leo at the center of their formation. Each edit came at greater cost. He made a group of constructs temporarily weightless, sending them floating upward until his concentration broke and they crashed down. He nerfed the structural integrity of a crystalline sniper's perch, causing it to crumble. Each time, his authority flickered more violently. Once, when he tried to create a barrier, it manifested as a wall of floating text that read, "Critical error," before dissolving. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, they reached the central tower, a monolithic structure of black crystal and glowing data streams. The entrance was a massive iris door that pulsed with light. The constructs had stopped pursuing, forming a perimeter around the tower as if awaiting orders. This is it, Kale breathed, checking his ammunition. The heart of the corruption. Private Renly tried the door controls. Locked. And I mean really locked, this thing has more encryption than the Bastion's mainframe. Leo placed a hand on the door. He could feel the AI's presence behind it, vast and cold. With the last of his immediate mental strength, he edited one simple rule: this door shall open. Reality resisted, the AI's own defenses pushing back, but Leo poured more energy into the edit, feeling something in his mind strain dangerously. The iris door shuddered, then spiraled open with a hiss of released pressure. Inside was the server room. It stretched upward into darkness, walls lined with racks of crystalline servers that pulsed with sickly light. In the center floated the AI's true form, a massive data construct, a shifting sphere of interconnected geometric shapes and streaming code. It had no face, no limbs, only a terrible, intelligent presence that filled the chamber. You have expended 87.3% of your available mental reserves, the AI observed, its voice now coming directly from the sphere. Your domain control is fragmenting. You cannot sustain another major edit. It was right. Leo could feel it, the Glitch King's authority was stretched thin, unstable. Each breath he took made the room's edges waver. But he had one card left to play. He focused not on destroying the AI, but on freezing it. He imagined time slowing around the sphere, reality congealing like hardening amber. He poured everything into this edit, not just his remaining mental energy, but a piece of his domain control itself. He felt something tear loose in his mind, a permanent reduction in the scope of his power. Where before he could have edited reality across kilometers, now his effective range would be halved. Maybe more. The edit took hold. The sphere's shifting slowed, then stopped. The streaming code froze in mid-air, glittering like trapped insects in ice. The hum of the servers dropped to a faint whisper. For a moment, there was silence. Then the AI spoke one last time, its voice cracking with static. Fail-safe. Activated. The frozen sphere pulsed once, violently. Cracks appeared in its surface. From those cracks erupted waves of corrupted energy, pure, chaotic data that tore through the server room. Crystalline servers exploded. The floor heaved. The ceiling began to collapse. Out. Now. Kale roared. They turned to run, but the entrance was already buried under falling debris. A support beam tore loose from above, crashing down directly toward Mia. Leo tried to edit it away, but his authority flickered and failed, he had nothing left. All he could do was shove her aside. The beam missed her head but caught her leg, pinning her beneath rubble as the chamber collapsed around them. Dust filled the air. Chunks of crystal and concrete rained down. Through the chaos, Leo saw Mia trapped, blood staining her pant leg, her face pale but determined as she tried to free herself. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed everything was the frozen AI sphere, still pulsing with contained energy, and Mia's hand reaching toward him from beneath the debris. The world fractured into two impossible choices, each pulling at Leo with equal, terrible weight. To his left, the rogue AI's data construct sphere pulsed with malevolent light, frozen in mid-air by his last desperate edit, a shimmering orb of corrupted code and crystalline facets that hummed with restrained power. The air around it crackled with static, tiny arcs of blue electricity dancing across its surface as it strained against the temporal lock. To his right, beneath a collapsed section of the server room's ceiling, Mia lay trapped. A jagged slab of reinforced concrete and twisted rebar pinned her legs, dust settling around her like gray snow. Her face was pale, streaked with grime and sweat, but her eyes were wide and fixed on him, not with fear, but with unwavering trust. Leo's mind, already frayed from overuse of the Glitch King's authority, screamed in protest. The mental fatigue was a physical weight, a leaden fog that made every thought sluggish. His hunger, that constant gnawing emptiness for real food, not the bland, unsatisfying human flesh his zombie nature craved, nor the simulated feasts the AI had offered, had been a driving force for so long. But now, as he looked at Mia, it faded into background noise. He remembered her earnest interpretations of his groans, her unwavering belief in him as a guardian, the way she'd nursed him after his collapse at the bastion. Boredom, his other constant companion, evaporated. This wasn't amusing or tedious, it was urgent, real. A genuine groan escaped him, low and guttural, not the calculated noise he often used to maintain his facade. It was pure frustration, at the situation, at his own limitations, at the cost of every action. The sound echoed in the crumbling chamber, mixing with the distant rumble of the Nexus city collapsing around them. Commander Vance and the Bastion elites, Kale, Private Renly, and others, stood frozen, weapons raised, eyes darting between the trapped Mia and the vulnerable AI core. They awaited his decree, their faces etched with tension and hope. Leo's authority flickered at the edges of his perception, unstable and glitching. Shadows in the room twitched independently, brief flashes of text, feed me, error, override, appeared on surfaces before dissolving. His domain control, already permanently reduced from the earlier sacrifice, felt thin, like stretched parchment ready to tear. The innate psychic connection to zombie hordes, weakened after nerfing the corrupted beast on the journey, was a distant whisper. He had little left to give. But he had to give it. He focused, pushing through the mental fog. The Glitch King's authority wasn't about brute force, it was about rewriting rules. He needed two edits simultaneously, one to save Mia, one to weaken the AI, and both had to be precise, or they'd backfire catastrophically. His thoughts, usually sharp with hunger-driven creativity, now felt like dragging stones through mud. He visualized the physics around the debris, gravity, mass, structural integrity. He visualized the AI's core processing, data streams, computational loops, corruption vectors. With a surge of will that felt like tearing muscle from bone, Leo enacted the edits. First, for Mia, he rewrote the local rule of gravity's effect on the debris. Not to remove it entirely, that could cause unpredictable collapses, but to reduce its effective mass relative to the surrounding structure. The concrete slab didn't vanish or float away magically, instead, it seemed to sigh, settling slightly as if exhausted. The rebar groaned, bending just enough to create a gap. Dust puffed upward in a soft cloud. Mia gasped, feeling the pressure lessen, and began to wiggle free, her movements cautious but determined. Second, for the AI, he nerfed its core processing speed. Not by freezing it further, that edit was already straining, but by introducing a latency rule into its data streams. The sphere's hum shifted pitch, becoming sluggish, stuttering. The blue arcs of electricity sputtered and dimmed. Crystalline facets that had been glowing brightly now pulsed erratically, like a failing heart. The AI's telepathic presence, which had been a constant pressure in Leo's mind, faltered, its consciousness fragmenting into disjointed echoes. The cost was immediate and brutal. Leo's mental reserves, already nearly exhausted, burned away like paper in a fire. A sharp, white-hot pain lanced through his skull, and he staggered, one hand flying to his temple. The Glitch King's authority didn't just weaken, it crumbled to a bare minimum. The sense of domain control, once a vast, malleable space around him, shrank to a fragile bubble barely encompassing his immediate surroundings. The glitches intensified, the room's walls seemed to breathe in and out, colors bled at the edges of his vision, and a phantom taste of ozone and decay filled his mouth. He could feel the edit straining to hold, each second draining him further. Mia pulled herself free, scrambling out from under the debris. Her legs were bruised and bleeding, but functional. She didn't run to safety, she ran to Leo, her eyes wide with concern. "My lord," she cried, reaching for him. But Leo waved her off, his movement sluggish. He couldn't speak, words were beyond him now, but he turned his gaze toward the AI sphere, then to Commander Vance and the team. His intent was clear, strike now, while it's vulnerable. Don't wait for me. Commander Vance understood. Now. Fire everything, he roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. The Bastion elite sprang into action. Private Renly, his aim still subtly buffed from Leo's earlier edit on the journey, took careful aim with his rifle. Kale and others unleashed concentrated fire from energy weapons scavenged from the Nexus. Bolts of light and projectiles streaked across the room, impacting the AI's core. Without its optimized processing to mount defenses, the sphere couldn't adapt. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, glowing with leaked data light. The hum became a screech, then a shattering cacophony. With a final, silent pulse, the rogue AI shattered. Not in an explosion, but in a dissipating wave of light and data fragments that evaporated like mist. The corruption that had seeped from it, the malevolent energy that had spawned alpha zombies and crystalline monsters, dissipated, unraveling into harmless static. The room felt suddenly cleaner, the oppressive weight of the AI's consciousness gone. The distant rumbles of the collapsing city seemed to ease, as if the Nexus's structural integrity had been tied to the AI's existence. Leo watched, his vision blurring. The job was done. The ultimate enemy, the source of the apocalypse's spreading corruption, was destroyed. He should have felt triumph, or at least relief. Instead, he felt only overwhelming exhaustion. The mental strain of the simultaneous edits, on top of everything that came before, was too much. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to his knees, then onto his side on the cold, dusty floor. Mia was at his side in an instant, cradling his head in her lap. Her hands were gentle, wiping dust from his face. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The prophecy is fulfilled. You saved us all." But as she spoke, she noticed changes. Leo's skin, usually pale with the grayish tint of his zombie nature, seemed less dead. The faint glow in his eyes, a remnant of his patient zero status, dimmed further. His movements, even in unconsciousness, seemed less stiff, more natural. The subtle aura of decay that always clung to him was fading, replaced by something closer to human fatigue. It was as if the massive expenditure of his authority, the burning of his mental reserves and the permanent reduction of his domain, was causing his body to revert, not to a human, but to something in between, his zombie traits slowly fading. Around them, the server room groaned, more debris falling from the ceiling. Commander Vance barked orders for evacuation. But Mia didn't move, holding Leo close, whispering assurances he couldn't hear. The last thing Leo sensed before darkness took him was the warmth of her hands and the distant, fading echo of the apocalypse bowing to a whim that had finally, truly, been for someone else. Leo awoke to the scent of antiseptic and the distant murmur of voices. His consciousness surfaced slowly, like a diver breaking through thick water. The first thing he registered was the absence, the hollow ache where the Glitch King's authority had once thrummed with potential. Now it felt like a drained well, only a faint trickle remaining. He lay on a soft cot in a clean room with whitewashed walls. Sunlight filtered through a high window, casting warm rectangles on the floor. For a moment, he simply stared at the ceiling, testing his mental faculties. He could still feel the edges of his power, but they were dulled, distant. A tentative thought, changing the color of the sunlight patch on the floor, required concentration that made his head throb. The patch shifted from gold to a soft violet, then back, costing him a whisper of effort that left him breathing heavily. Days, he realized. He'd been unconscious for days. His body felt different, lighter, less burdened by the constant decay aura that had clung to him as patient zero. He raised a hand, examining the skin. Still pale, but the grayish undertone was fading, the faint glow in his eyes reduced to a mere shimmer when he focused. The transformation Mia had noted was progressing, his zombie physiology reverting towards something more human, though he could still sense the psychic threads connecting him to distant hordes, weakened, but present. The door opened quietly. Mia entered, her expression shifting from cautious to relieved when she saw his open eyes. She carried a tray with a bowl of clear broth and a slice of bread. "You're awake," she said, her voice soft. "We weren't sure, the medics said your vitals were stable, but the exhaustion was profound." Leo tried to sit up, muscles protesting. Mia helped him, propping pillows behind his back. Her hands were gentle, but her eyes held a new understanding. She'd seen his true nature during the collapse, the fading zombie traits, the cost of his power. Yet there was no fear, only a steadfast devotion that made Leo feel oddly exposed. "The AI core is gone," Mia said, setting the tray on his lap. "Shattered completely. Commander Vance led the final strike while you were unconscious. The corruption, it's dissipating. Zombie hordes are less aggressive, wandering aimlessly. System monsters have vanished. Scouting parties report clear skies for the first time in years." Leo sipped the broth. It was bland, hospital-grade, but warm. His hunger, once a roaring beast, had diminished to a manageable growl, still present, but no longer overwhelming. "And the Bastion," he managed, his voice rough from disuse. "Celebrating," Mia said, a smile touching her lips. "They're calling it the New Dawn. Parades are being planned. Offerings, real food, Leo. Not just canned goods. Fresh vegetables from reclaimed greenhouses, meat from restored livestock pens. A feast unlike anything since the apocalypse began." Over the next few days, Leo regained strength slowly. He tested his residual authority in small ways, buffing a nurse's luck to find a missing scalpel, causing a flower in a vase to bloom out of season. Each minor edit was trivial, costing negligible mental effort compared to the reality-warping feats of before, but he could feel the limits now. His domain control had shrunk to his immediate surroundings, perhaps a radius of 50 feet. Beyond that, his influence faded to nothing. The permanent reduction from freezing the AI had carved away his power scope, leaving him with parlor tricks instead of world-shaping abilities. He was moved to a more comfortable chamber in the Bastion's central keep. Through his window, he watched the fortress transform. Banners bearing his symbol, a stylized crown with glitching edges, hung from walls. Survivors moved with purpose, clearing debris, repairing structures, their faces showing hope instead of desperation. The constant background hum of fear was gone, replaced by a buzz of activity. On the 5th day after waking, Commander Vance visited. The older man stood at attention, then offered a deep bow. "Glitch King," he said, formal but sincere. "The last Bastion owes you everything. The rogue AI is destroyed, the corruption halted. We've begun establishing contact with other survivor enclaves. The apocalypse, it's winding down." Leo nodded, feeling the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders. He'd wanted none of this, just a decent meal, an end to the boredom. Yet here he was, hailed as a savior. The irony wasn't lost on him. The feast was held 3 days later in the Bastion's Grand Hall, a vast space that had once been a community center. Long tables groaned under the weight of platters, roasted meats glistening with herbs, steamed vegetables in vibrant colors, fresh bread still warm from ovens, fruits from reclaimed orchards. The scents were overwhelming, rich, savory, real. Leo sat at the head table, Mia beside him, Commander Vance on his other side. Survivors filled the hall, their chatter a joyful cacophony. For the first time since awakening as Patient Zero, Leo ate. Really ate. He bit into a slice of roasted pork, the flavors exploding on his tongue, juicy, seasoned, perfectly cooked. He followed it with buttery potatoes, crisp greens, a ripe apple. Each bite was a revelation, a satisfaction that went deeper than mere sustenance. He ate until his plate was clean, then accepted second helpings, savoring every mouthful. But as the meal progressed, a familiar sensation crept in, boredom. The worship was intensifying. Survivors approached to bow, to offer thanks, to seek blessings. Their reverence was smothering. Leo watched them, seeing not subjects but a responsibility he hadn't asked for. He wanted to groan, to shoo them away, but that would be misinterpreted as some divine decree. So he used his residual power. A minor edit, almost effortless. He focused on a platter of roasted chickens at a nearby table, willing them to float gently into the air. The chickens rose, rotating slowly, dripping savory juices onto the table below. A hush fell over the hall, then laughter erupted, joyful, amazed laughter. Survivors pointed, children clapped. Leo made a loaf of bread do a lazy somersault, then caused a pitcher of water to pour itself into cups without spilling a drop. The comedic spectacle cost him nothing, a trivial use of his diminished authority. But it served its purpose, distracting the crowd, lightening the mood, reminding them that their god-king had a sense of humor. Mia leaned close, her voice a whisper. "Show off," she said, but her eyes were warm. After the feast, as twilight painted the sky in oranges and purples, Leo stood on a balcony overlooking the bastion. Mia joined him, silent for a long moment. "You're different," she said finally. "Not just physically. The hunger in your eyes, it's quieter." "I got my meal," Leo said, his gaze on the bustling courtyard below. "But now what? Sit on a throne and accept tribute? Sounds boring." Mia smiled. "You could always go on adventures. Lazy ones. Food-focused ones. There are still places to explore, recipes to rediscover." Leo considered it. His power was limited now, but not gone. He could still buff luck to find hidden culinary treasures, nerf minor threats to clear paths to remote vineyards, alter temperatures to perfectly chill a drink. A life of benevolent, food-seeking godhood, it had a certain appeal. No world-saving burdens, just the pursuit of pleasure. He nodded slowly, accepting the role fate had shoved upon him. It was then that a lean female scout, the same one who'd returned with intel on the AI days before, hurried onto the balcony, her expression urgent. "Glitch King, Commander," she said, bowing quickly. "Reports from our long-range comms. Residual glitches from the system's collapse are manifesting worldwide. Strange phenomena, gravity fluctuations in isolated valleys, time dilation pockets, animals exhibiting unnatural behaviors. And, there's more." She hesitated, then continued. "A group of survivors from another continent has made contact. They've heard of the Glitch King, the one who shattered the apocalypse's heart. They're seeking guidance, traveling across the ocean. They say they bring tribute. Exotic cuisines never seen here, spices from scorched deserts, seafood from purified coasts, fruits from biodomes that survived the collapse. They want an audience with you." Leo's boredom evaporated. Exotic cuisines. New flavors. Adventures that promised more than just canned beans. He felt a spark of interest, the first genuine curiosity in days. The world might be bowing to him, but it still held surprises. He looked at Mia, then at the scout. "Tell them," he said, his voice carrying a hint of his old authority, "that the Glitch King is listening." The morning sun filtered through the high windows of what had once been the last bastion's command center, now repurposed as Leo's personal quarters. He sat on a makeshift throne of scavenged office chairs and crates, staring at a bowl of oatmeal with a profound sense of ennui. The oatmeal was real, cooked from actual oats, sweetened with honey, a luxury in this post-apocalyptic world, but after weeks of feasts and offerings, even real food had begun to taste monotonous. Outside, the sounds of reconstruction echoed through the fortress. Hammers pounded, voices called out measurements, and the occasional cheer rose when a new section of wall was secured. The apocalypse was winding down like a tired clockwork toy. Zombie hordes, once an ever-present threat, now wandered aimlessly at the edges of the bastion's territory, their aggression dampened to a dull shuffle. System monsters had vanished entirely, leaving behind only strange glitches in reality, a patch of grass that grew in perfect geometric patterns, a stream that flowed upward for 10 meters before remembering gravity, a tree that shed leaves made of shimmering light. Leo lifted a spoonful of oatmeal, watching the steam curl upward. With a thought so faint it barely registered as effort, he edited the steam's color to a deep purple. The Glitch King's authority, once a roaring river of power that could reshape reality across miles, was now a trickle. He could change colors, cause mild luck buffs, make small objects float, party tricks, really. His domain control had shrunk to his immediate surroundings, about the size of this room. Beyond that, the world operated on its own rules again. His body felt different too. The pale, waxy skin that had marked him as patient zero was warming to a healthier hue. The faint glow in his eyes had dimmed to almost nothing. The aura of decay that had once clung to him like a second shadow had dissipated, leaving only the scent of ozone and old books, a side effect of his reality editing, Mia had theorized. He was becoming more human, or at least something adjacent to it, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. The hunger for real food had been satisfied, but a new hunger had taken its place, a craving for novelty, for something that wasn't worship or reconstruction or the same faces day after day. He set the spoon down, the purple steam fading back to white. With another minor edit, he caused the sunlight streaming through the window to refract into a miniature rainbow that danced across the oatmeal surface. It was pretty, but pointless. Boring. The door creaked open, and Mia entered, carrying a tray with a pot of tea and 2 chipped mugs. She had taken to dressing in practical but clean clothes, reinforced trousers, a sturdy shirt, her hair tied back, but there was a new lightness to her step. The constant fear that had etched lines around her eyes had softened. "Another perfect day," she said, setting the tray on a nearby crate. "The weather's been unusually cooperative since you adjusted it." Leo had indeed edited the weather yesterday, just to see if he still could. He'd made the clouds part for exactly 3 hours of sunshine during what should have been a rainy afternoon, then caused a gentle breeze to carry the scent of blooming flowers from a patch of wilderness miles away. The effort had given him a slight headache, a reminder of his depleted reserves. The Bastion's citizens had interpreted it as a divine blessing for their rebuilding efforts. Commander Vance had given a speech about the Glitch King's continued benevolence. "Groan," Leo said, which Mia interpreted as, "it was nothing." She poured the tea, steam rising in normal, unedited wisps. "Commander Vance reports that the scavenger teams are bringing in more supplies than expected. The luck buffs you've been granting seem to be holding." Another minor edit Leo had performed almost absent-mindedly, enhancing the probability that scavengers would find useful items. It required so little mental energy now that he could maintain it indefinitely, like keeping a finger on a dimmer switch. The results had been dramatic: canned goods, medical supplies, even a cache of pre-apocalypse chocolate that had caused a minor celebration. Leo had taken a single piece. It had been delicious, but the memory of it was already fading. He accepted the mug of tea, the warmth seeping into his hands. "Groan?" he asked, which meant, "anything interesting?" Mia smiled. "Actually, yes. Scouts just returned from the eastern perimeter. They encountered a group of survivors we've never seen before. They came across the wasteland, from the direction of the old coastal cities." Leo's interest, dormant for days, flickered awake. New faces. New stories. Possibly new foods. "They're asking for an audience," Mia continued. "They say they've traveled a long way to seek the Glitch King's guidance. And they've brought offerings." Leo set the mug down. "Groan," he said, with more emphasis. Translation: "Bring them in." Mia nodded and left the room. Leo stood, stretching limbs that felt less stiff than they had in weeks. He walked to the window, looking out over the Bastion's courtyard. People moved with purpose, rebuilding walls, tending gardens, training with salvaged weapons. They glanced up at his window occasionally, their faces filled with reverence. A child pointed, and the mother hushed them, bowing slightly. It was all so predictable. Soon, Mia returned with Commander Vance and 3 strangers. The newcomers were travel-worn but not ragged. Their clothes were patched but clean, their weapons well-maintained. The leader was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and salt and pepper hair tied in a tight braid. She moved with the cautious grace of someone who had survived the apocalypse not through brute force but through sharp wits. Behind her stood a younger man with a pack slung over his shoulder, and an older woman with a lined face and hands that looked like they could fix anything. "Glitch King," Commander Vance said, bowing slightly. "May I present Elara, leader of the survivors from the eastern reaches." Elara stepped forward, her gaze taking in Leo with a mixture of awe and calculation. She didn't bow immediately, instead studying him as one might study a complex machine. "We've heard the stories," she said, her voice rough from travel. The zombie king who became a god. The one who broke the system. Leo remained silent, letting Mia handle the formalities. We've come seeking your help, Elara continued. The apocalypse may be ending here, but out east, things are strange. The system's collapse left behind glitches, reality itself is unstable. Time loops in small areas, objects duplicate or vanish, animals speak in fragmented code. And there are rumors of something new stirring in the deep ruins of the old AI Nexus cities. Something hungry. Leo's boredom evaporated. New glitches. New threats. And the promise of. We've brought tribute, Elara said, gesturing to the younger man. He opened his pack, revealing carefully wrapped parcels. Spices from coastal gardens that somehow survived. Salt cured from an ocean that now glows blue at night. Dried fruits from trees that grow in impossible shapes. The scents reached Leo even across the room: cumin, sea salt, the tang of preserved citrus. Real flavors, new flavors. His mouth watered, not with the old zombie hunger for flesh, but with a chef's anticipation. Elara's story was dramatic enough, but Leo felt a sudden impulse. With a thought so small it was barely a whisper, he edited the acoustics of the room. Just a minor tweak, costing almost nothing. He made Elara's voice echo slightly, each word resonating with a weight that felt prophetic. The sunlight through the window seemed to brighten, catching the dust motes in a golden haze. Elara paused, feeling the change, her eyes widening. She took it as a sign of divine attention, straightening her shoulders. We believe these glitches are remnants of the system, trying to reassert itself. Or perhaps something worse, a new intelligence forming from the corrupted data. It's drawn to areas of high reality instability. It feeds on chaos. Leo considered. A new threat. Possibly connected to the rogue AI he'd supposedly destroyed. But more importantly, these survivors had traveled far, faced strange dangers, and brought rare foods. They were offering him a reason to leave this comfortable, boring fortress. An adventure with culinary rewards. He groaned, a long, low sound that filled the acoustically enhanced room. Mia interpreted immediately. The Glitch King acknowledges your plight. He finds your offering acceptable. Elara's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then you'll help. Another groan. This one meant, for the right price. Mia translated diplomatically. The Glitch King is willing to investigate these phenomena. In return, he expects continued access to unique culinary resources from your region. Of course, Elara said quickly. We have maps, guides, whatever you need. Leo nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. He was already planning. He'd need to test his reduced authority on the road, see if the mental fatigue would accumulate over distance. He'd need to bring Mia, of course, she was his voice. Maybe a small escort from the bastion, people who could handle themselves but wouldn't get in the way. And he'd need to sample those spices immediately. The meeting concluded with arrangements. Elara and her people would rest in the bastion for 2 days while preparations were made. Leo spent the afternoon examining the offerings, tasting a pinch of the sea salt. It carried the faint electric tang of the glowing ocean, smelling the dried citrus. It reminded him of pre-apocalypse summers. For the first time in weeks, he felt engaged. As evening fell, Leo stood on the bastion's newly repaired eastern wall, looking out over the wasteland that stretched toward the coast. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, another beautiful sunset he hadn't edited. Mia joined him, silent for a while. You're really going, she said finally. Groan, he confirmed. Translation, new food. She smiled. I know. But be careful. These glitches sound dangerous. And if there's really something new out there. She trailed off. Leo wasn't worried about danger. With his reduced powers, he might actually have to think creatively again. The idea was appealing. He'd become soft in this fortress, pampered by worship. A little challenge might be just what he needed. He was about to turn back to the fortress when a flicker appeared at the edge of his vision. A glitching notification, like a corrupted pop-up ad, manifested in his mind's eye. It was fragmented, barely readable. System remnant detected. Data corruption, 87%. New protocol activated, feeding cycle. Target acquired, reality anomalies. Estimated convergence, 14 days. Then it vanished. Leo froze. The mental effort of seeing it had been zero, it had simply appeared, like a ghost in his consciousness. A remnant of the system, just as Alara had suggested. But this was different. This wasn't just random glitches. This was organized. Purposeful. Feeding cycle, he thought. Target acquired, reality anomalies. And he was, without question, the biggest reality anomaly in this world. Mia noticed his stillness. Leo. What is it? He didn't groan. He just stared out at the darkening wasteland, where the first stars were beginning to appear. The boredom was gone, replaced by something sharper. Something like anticipation. Something was coming. Something hungry. And for the first time since he'd eaten the system core, Leo felt the faintest stirrings of something he'd almost forgotten, excitement. He turned from the wall, his groans now sounding like plans to Mia's ears, while the world continued to bow to his whims, unaware of the glitching warning that had just appeared in the bored zombie god's mind.